history, tension, rivalry, friendship and elite stories. Here are some of the best off-camera anecdotes from the Ryder Cup. Number 1, Tiger's loo roll. The protagonist, Lee Westwood's former caddy, Billy Foster, sat in a toilet cubicle at the Belfry. As he went to relieve his first morning nerves, Foster noticed only one of the 2 cubicles had loo roll, and while he was seated, in came a tiger into the empty cubicle, and he realised his mistake all too late. So Foster took some paper, reached under the cubicle with a rescue offering, and as Tiger went to take it, Foster uttered the words, "Europe, 1 up." As it happened, Europe did go on to win. Fast forward 10 years to the miraculous Medina, when, after a gruelling Saturday, Rory McIlroy overslept on the Sunday and was in danger of missing his tee time. Thankfully for him, the person booking player transport was Erica Stoll. She sorted him a police escort to the course. 3 years later, McIlroy proposed in Paris. The next story is told by Scottish legend Sam Torrance about the great Seve, who apparently despised the Americans mainly because of a diminutive US reporter who kept calling him Steve.
Hey, my name is Severiano Jose. There's no Steve, there's no Steve. Next day, Steve.
Torrance also tells of how Seve regularly gave coaching clinics to his European teammates, but a week later at the Italian Open, when the same players asked for advice, Seve would tell them to and see you next year. Having started with a Billy Foster story, let's finish with one from the 12th tee at Oakland Hills in 2004. It was Jimenez and Garcia against Westwood and Clark in a practice round, and as they finished, Foster decided to jump in the buggy and speed away with all their clubs, only to lose control entirely and tumble onto the course and see it careering towards the spectators. Thankfully, the Red Sea parted and the buggy smashed into a tree, with viewers and clubs still intact.
Yeah, good evening everybody and welcome once again to another edition of Trans-Europe Express, your Sunday night ingestion of everything that's going on in football in Europe and beyond. I'm Danny Kelly, and with me for the next 3 hours in the continued and well-earned absence of Andy Braselda, where I think he's back next week. But Daniele Fisichella, very much part of the furniture, very much friend of the show, is with us as well. We've got all the usual bells and whistles for you tonight, all the major stories from across the continent. Mbappe, which obviously Real Madrid, they keep getting okay results, but they're not playing very well, are they? We'll get a reaction from all of the things that went on in the Champions League over the last few days, as well as the Europa League as well. We'll be joined by French football expert Julien Laurent to talk about France. Rafa Honigstein, wow, we're really going for the big hitters here. We'll talk about German football, including another setback for Bayern Munich in the last few hours. And Tim Vicker, who of course, will join us from South America. We've got a poll for you as well about who's been the biggest flop in the Champions League phase. We've rather cheekily put Newcastle in there. Lots to get through with myself and Daniele Fisichella. As always, all I can express is our gratitude that on a Sunday night when you could be doing anything, you're here with us for all or part of the journey. Welcome one, welcome all. Bienvenue, Fulcher to Trans-Europe Express on talkSPORT. Good evening, Daniele. How are you?
Hi, Danny. I'm very well, thank you. Good evening.
Good. Well, first of all, there are several games going on high-profile games around the continent tonight. The one I've got in front of me, I hope you can tell me to go to another one at the moment, is the game between Athletic Bilbao and Real Sociedad, of course, an important derby game there in the Basque Country. And at half-time, it's Athletic Bilbao 0, Real Sociedad 1, as Atletic's, how can we put it, average form this season continues. They're a goal down at half-time. Tell us about the games in Italy and France, please, Daniele.
Well, let's start with France. Strasbourg and Paris Saint-Germain currently 1-1. A very important game for Paris Saint-Germain as they try to regain the top of Ligue 1. Seny Mayulu putting Paris Saint-Germain ahead after 22 minutes, but Guela Due for Strasbourg equalizing on 27 minutes. Currently in the second half an hour to go. 1-1, and over in Italy, in Parma, the Stadio Tardini, is Juventus, who are winning 3-1 and playing really well. A convincing performance for Juve. Took the lead with a header from Gleison Bremer, then scored again in the first half with Weston McKennie. In the second half, they conceded a comical own goal with Andrea Cambiasso, but 2 minutes after, they reestablished the 2-goal lead again with Gleison Bremer. So a brace for the Brazilian defender. Juventus really in form.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, we're going to spend the next 25 minutes talking about the Champions League now that the opening league phase has come to an end. Now, in about 10 minutes, we'll turn our attention to that draw, what it means particularly for a whole flock of Italian clubs with Daniele here who are still in the tournament, but in the punishment round. 1 or 2 tasty draws for them as well. But first of all, I just want to get Daniele's reaction, and I'm going to make a little speech here. Please forgive me, everybody. Indulge me. When UEFA changed the rules and changed the way the league was done, it was, I think, partially for television purposes. Of course, they wanted to show more matches, have more matches to sell, and partially because they wanted, with the increased television money, to close the gap between the power of the Premier Leagues and the Premier League clubs and the rest of the continent. Equally, you could say that when they introduced the idea of a 5th team qualifying for the Champions League, or an extra Champions League place for countries that have done well, they probably didn't envisage that Tottenham would go and win the Europa League from outside of the top 5, and you'd have 6 English teams in the tournament. Everything they do to try and weaken the Premier League has backfired so far. And so we have a situation this season where 5 of the top 8 that have gone through are English clubs. And Newcastle have got a difficult geographical but decent footballing draw against Karabag in the extra qualification round. So it is completely within the bounds of possibility that 37.5%, over a third of all the teams in the Champions League last 16 will be English clubs. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that they're going to win it, because you've got financially, how can we say, enhanced, I don't want to use the word doped clubs in Spain and France. You've got the cultural singularity that is Bayern Munich. So it's not guaranteed that an English club is going to win it, but they are powering through these early stages. And Daniele, I have a theory about this, and that is that the Premier League is changing before our very eyes very quickly. We saw some of it last year with Liverpool. We would have seen more of it if Arsenal hadn't had such bad injuries. But this thing of the physical power of the teams, the reliance on set pieces, but also the way they're breaking down zonal positional football, which has been the be-all and end-all 15 years since Barcelona perfected it. With, in Arsenal's case, look at some of the runs their fullbacks make from out to in and in to out. Look at the way Rice starts a run and runs 70 yards to make one run into penalty area. He's not being stopped because players are technically inferior to him. They just can't keep up with him physically. And the Premier League is becoming more and more like this. There's a load of stuff about this online. If you go on YouTube, there are people dissecting this stuff. I can't remember the guy, another fellow did it in print the other day. I'll come back to that in a second. But whatever is happening, the best Premier League teams are using the things they do in the Premier League to overpower teams. And then the worst teams who are in the Champions League from England, I use Spurs as an example, they are freed up from having to play against this, and they look better in Europe as well. Whatever's happening, Daniele, there seems to be, say, at the moment, until we get to the last stages, a real gap between the Premier League teams and the rest. Two things.
I totally agree.
Is this right? And secondly, how is this going down on the continent?
Well, first of all, I do agree with you, and I think that the English clubs have got an advantage sometimes even before the ball is kicked. The environment helps the English teams. There is collective wealth, there is elite decision off the pitch, a league environment that forces constant tactical evolution. And then, of course, there is the financial power. If you look at 6 of the Premier League clubs sits inside the top 10 of the Deloitte Football Money League, and the 50% of the English club are in the top 30. So it's no surprise that then 5 of them qualify in the top 8 of the Champions League. However, it also has to be said that the top 3 of this Deloitte Football Money League, so the richest club in Europe, are not English. Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Bayern. And coming back to the point, those will be the big guns that the English clubs will have to contend with. But then when it comes to the style of play, and I think that's where the discussion and the debate on the Premier League comes into force, in Europe, the style of play I feel is more open. There are fewer teams that play with a low block. The intensity is not quite as high as in the Premier League. And that's why perhaps some of the teams that this season have struggled in the Premier League to break down, teams that defend deeply but also are very organized, like, for example, Liverpool. They struggled against low blocks in the Premier League. In the Champions League, have succeeded. Tottenham, that sometimes struggle against team pressing them, have succeeded in the Champions League. And then again, as some other players pointed out, the teams in Europe play less on the transition. Of course, have got a less relentless rhythm. And then, of course, that helps the fact that the English teams who are tactically perhaps even more evolved, and they can base their success on an environment and on developments that progress at a faster speed than in the rest of Europe, have got a competitive advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I do take the point about finances, but it isn't all finance because, as you say, the richest clubs in Europe, and we'll still run. We haven't got to the latter stages yet. We saw last year how Liverpool failed. City went out in the round of 16, I think I'm right in saying. Is this a good look for the tournament, though? Apparent domination by one league. I don't think it is. But what really can UEFA do about it? If, as you say, the organisational excellence of the English clubs is turning financial advantage into playing advantage, there's not much they can do to stop it, really, is there?
No, absolutely. They can't do it, and the way that the Champions League is organised favours with 8 fixtures those teams that are more dominant, because there are more games where they can assert the dominance. And then let's look at how they did compared to the other teams from other big leagues. Well, the La Liga teams this season in the Champions League have lost all but won the 10 meetings against the Premier League sides, and the aggregate score was 21-5 in the 7 games that they got.
That's
beaten.
Incredible.
But that's because partially Barcelona, Real Madrid, Villarreal, Atletico Bilbao haven't performed as well as we thought they could have done. And I think there is also something to go with them. I mean, if Real Madrid and Barcelona are not quite at the level, out of a sudden, La Liga teams do suffer. And we know Real Madrid, of course, have sacked their manager very recently. When it comes to the Bundesliga sides, it is pretty much the same and obvious discussion. Yes, there's only one club that can compete with the Premier League side, which is Bayern Munich, and got beaten by Arsenal. But in the grand scheme of things, that 3-1 at the Emirates Stadium today doesn't really count for much. And the history of the Champions League from last season, where Liverpool finished top and then got knocked out of PSG, tell us the story. It doesn't mean that Arsenal are going to stay so dominant and so stronger compared to Bayern Munich. Funnily enough, the league that had the best success against English leagues this season in Champions League was Ligue 1. 2 wins, 2 draws, and 1 defeat. And whereas the French clubs are probably more preoccupied with their domestic financial crisis, actually many of them see the Premier League as a good opportunity to sell at a high fee their best talents. So for the French clubs, actually, the fact that the Premier League gets stronger and stronger is actually a good news, because ultimately, yes, PSG can still compete against them and the other clubs can sell. And the same could be said about the Italian clubs, who in the recent years have sold some of the best players, of course, to the Premier League clubs.
Yeah, I mean, the joke in Germany used to be, the Bundesliga is financed by the Premier League. If some of the transfers I've seen mooted for the summer, the Premier League will soon be joking that it is financed by the Saudi Arabian League. We'll see what happens. Look, as I say, I'm making no guarantees about how far these English clubs will go, but it is an extraordinary sight. At one stage, it looked like it could be all 6 of them that are going to go through in that top 8. And I'm pretty sure that the league, Daniele, how can I put this? It may not reflect the exact reality, because I doubt very much the Spurs are the 4th best team in Europe. I'll put it no stronger than that.
The only thing, Danny, just quickly, the only thing that can stop English teams to win it or to play each other in the final is the fact that they have to play against other English teams week in and week out.
Exactly.
Therefore, they could be exhausted by the end of the season.
Bayern or Inter Milan, for instance, may have their titles wrapped up by, quite early on. Now, Arsenal may do it this year. But there's still the Premier League games are. There's no one takes a holiday in the Premier League. You're right. Come April, English teams are often really this is why the World Cup's going to be such a strange tournament, isn't it? All teams are getting more tired, but in England, where every game, with the possible exception this season, with no disrespect to Wolverhampton Wanderers, with the possible exception of the games against Wolves, there are just endless games to be dragged out of the cold, hard earth. Really interesting situation. As was the draw for the next round, and we'll talk about that next year on Trans Europe Express, because this qualification round sees at least one rematch from the last day, that dramatic and monstrously dramatic game between Real Madrid and Benfica, as well as, and I'll be getting really leaning on you here, Daniele, a whole host of Italian clubs, at least some of them who have been winners of the tournament, needing to go through the qualification round. That's next here on Trans Europe Express. You'll listen to me, Danny Kelly, and the familiar and comforting voice of our Italian football expert, and today my co-host Daniele Fisichella.
Seem like a different team. Fernandes is picking the ball up in areas he wants to, and it looks like he's controlling that midfield. You've got Mainu who's come back into it. He's really, amazing performances, really, when he hasn't played in the Premier League since probably May, isn't it? Something like that. So, certain players have come. Yeah, certain players have come back in, Ben, and it looks like they've been let off the leash. And some of the goals against against Arsenal, Cunha's goal was a fantastic winner. But even the second and first goal, Burmo took it so well.
Yeah, I think United have had these players. They've had players that are verging on the edge of world class. They've had them for the last couple of seasons, but they just haven't been able to show it. They haven't been able to go out there and express themselves and play with a smile on the face. I know this system. We all know this system didn't really suit Man United with 3 at the back, and it wasn't rocket science to change it to 4. It really wasn't. So I think everybody is on board with this kind of confidence, and now everybody. But you look at the fixtures they've got as well: Spurs, West Ham, Everton, Palace. The next 4 games. That guy, the one who hasn't cut his hair for a while, the United Strand.
Yeah, you're listening to Trans Europe Express with Daniele Fisichella and me, Danny Kelly. Thank you for being along with us. We really do appreciate it. Let me just tell you that almost an hour gone now in the big derby in the Basque Country. It remains Athletic Bilbao 0, Real Sociedad 1. Gonzalo Guedes, Wolves fans, dry your tears. Got the goal after 37 minutes. And needless to say, the referee is now spending as much time talking to the benches as both teams get pretty het up about the goings-on the pitch, which, of course, is how a derby game should be. Daniele, we've talked about the Champions League in theory. Let's talk about it in practice now. So we've had the draw for the so-called punishment round, the qualification round. We'll talk about Real and Benfica when we get on to Mbappe, watch a little later in the show. You could argue Newcastle, despite the travelling, got a nice draw. Karabag have done very well, but they're not in the same level as the Premier League team, so that's pretty good. I want to talk about lucky draws, though. Last year, Paris Saint-Germain failed to qualify for the top 8 and drew one of the teams that they always whack in France. This time, they failed to qualify for the top 8 and drew Monaco, one of the teams they always whack in France.
Yes, and last season, after knocking out Brest in those playoffs with an aggregate score of 10-0, Brest, who have been one of the big surprises of the season before in France, of course, and of the Champions League as well. Yes, PSG, who had an underwhelming first phase, then advanced it through the round of 16, where, of course, they knocked out Napoli. But, it was a different PSG who was a proper revival, really, and in the second part of the season were much better. This season, still underwhelming because they didn't qualify in the top 8, and now they got Monaco, who, by the way, is a team that is in real crisis. I know they won at the weekend, but they were 14th in the table before that win. Sacked the manager early in the season, replaced Adi Hutter with Sebastien Pocognoli. And PSG can be absolutely happy with that because overall in Europe, it's said that when you get same nation derby in a European competition, they really affect you. They really detract from your league form, and there is an awful lot of mind games that go into it.
Sure.
But I think with the exception of France, where PSG are so dominant, and they've been so dominant, especially in regard to Monaco in the last few years, that this draw look extremely kind for them. Surely, obviously, they don't have to travel far. They play a team that they normally beat. Yes, it will be like 2 more league games for them, which they seem to have their hands on. By the way, they're still drawing 1-1 tonight at Strasbourg, so maybe let's not jump into the conclusion, but definitely they've been better than Monaco this season.
Okay, well, listen, we'll get on to Napoli going out a little later, not even qualifying Antonio Conte and all the rest of it. We'll do that when we go to Italy, but the other Italian sides have all, now they know what they've got to do to get through to the last 16. Atalanta have Dortmund, Juventus have Galatasaray, and Inter, currently top of the Scudetto, have Bodø Glimt. Each of those ties presents its own challenges. Dortmund are an inconsistent but decent team. Galatasaray, you could get beaten in Turkey by 2 or 3, and nobody wants to go to Bodø this time of the year. Talking about the Italian teams and how they might get on. They could all win, but these are tough draws for some of them.
They could. Remember last season, 3 teams in the playoff of the Champions League, none of the Italian ones qualified: Juventus, Milan, and Atalanta. This season, hopefully, at least 2 of them. Let's start with the most difficult one, which is Atalanta stripped to Borussia Dortmund, because Borussia Dortmund are second in the Bundesliga. Yes, they are inconsistent. They were second best against Inter, but that was Inter. Atalanta is a team that I think they throw the qualification away after beating Marseille, after beating Chelsea. Then they had the opportunity against Atletico Bilbao on match day 7. They went ahead, but they conceded 3 goals. Couple of them on the count, they were caught on the break, and then they lost also in the last game of the season of the league phase against Union Saint-Gilloise without really having a go at it. So I think Atalanta, yes, the momentum has shifted, and Borussia Dortmund, of course, is a team that, especially at home, in the Champions League, they're extremely good. They only lost 2 of the last 22 games played in the Champions League at home. Of course, they lost to Inter as well. Juventus Galatasaray is an intriguing one because Galatasaray have got a very strong forward line. Attack is going to be a difficult environment, an environment where Juventus over 13 years ago lost and got knocked out famously at the group stage. You wonder who the manager was of the Juventus. There's a clue. Maybe what we're talking about next up. But Juve at the moment are turning up, really. I mean, at the moment they're winning 4-1 at Parma, and since Spalletti has taken charge, they are really a pleasure to watch. You will feel they go enough to beat a Galatasaray side, who on the other hand, they got a lot of players, Osimhen first of all, but also Mauricardi, who have experience playing in Italy, and the manager, Okan Buruk, used to play in Italy as well. So I think it's going to be a tense one for Juve. And finally, Inter, Bodo Glimt, the Arctic Circle in mid-February. Nobody really wants to go there, but I feel if Inter take the game seriously, if they give Bodo Glimt respect, not too much respect, but they try obviously to not get overrun and not get suffocated by the press of Bodo Glimt, especially at home. Then with the second leg at the San Siro, I think Inter should be able to make it. Bodo Glimt have got a great record at home in the European competitions. They recently beat a lot of Italian teams, Lazio and Roma, lost to Juventus this season 3-2 in a close game, but away from home, Bodo Glimt don't travel particularly well. Of course, last Wednesday, they beat Atletico Madrid.
What an amazing result. Yeah, what an amazing result.
It was, and totally deserved, has to be said, because they had a lot of chances. But Inter have got the know-how, especially at home in the Champions League. So that on paper looks the easiest of the draw, because otherwise Inter could have got Benfica, by the way, and Mourinho. So, I think it would have been more complex.
I mean, last Sunday, we had Lars Sivertsen on, because we're good at these sort of things, to tell us about Boda's chances and their rise and rise and rise. And he said something absolutely extraordinary. He said the players have been together as a group. Some of them have gone away and come back for so long that if the lights were to go out, particularly in the home games on the artificial pitch in the Arctic Circle, Daniele, if the lights went out, he thinks the Bodo Glimt players will still find each other with their passes. They are so well drilled into what they're doing. And that struck a chord of fear in me, because those sort of teams, if they catch on the right day, can do damage. The other one we haven't had a chance to mention is Atletico Madrid, who they play a Club Brugge team who they should be better than that, but Atletico, they're not quite the team they have been over the past few years.
Yeah, especially defensively. They conceded far too many goals. And in the game against Bodo Glimt, they did concede many chances. I would have expected, after taking the lead, to just basically lock the game and make sure, the game was very fragmented. And actually, it never happened. And, going even to the Wanda Metropolitano doesn't seem as intimidating as it used to be. Simeone is under pressure. He's being booed by his own fans. It is a team that, of course, find it hard to compete domestically with the likes of Real Madrid and Barcelona.
Oh, no, he's been a miracle worker there. We'll talk about him later on as well.
But he's so far behind in the league that this game a lot hinges really for him. And Club Brugge on the other hand, they have grown a European pedigree now these days, especially when they play at home. They can really impose the rhythm. Last season, Brugge knocked out Atalanta deservingly, and in the last game of the Champions League, they beat Marseille again deservingly. So I think this probably is on a knife edge, is very balanced. As I would say, is also Olympiacos Leverkusen.
I don't want to get you into trouble in Italy, so I'm going to state now who will go through among these Italian clubs. And in a unusual piece of radio, you just nod your head. Keep quiet if you think I'm right. I think 2 Italian clubs will go through. Juventus will qualify, so will Inter, but Atalanta will go out. Thank you very much. That's all I need to know. That's about right. Listen, it's going to be the qualification matches look great on paper. I'm looking forward to them hugely. We'll have a look at what Paris have got to do, and that huge tie, that return of Mourinho yet again to Madrid with Benfica a little later in the programme. Let's give the Champions League a little rest now for a little while and turn to what's going on in France. Some amazing stories there. Needless to say, Roberto De Zerbi, my dear, a brilliant coach, but a man that brings chaos everywhere he goes, has had an amazing week, good, bad and indifferent in Marseille, and we'll start with that. Thank you for being with us here on Trans Europe Express.
Looking at the points, they're on the same points as Crystal Palace. They're 2 in front of Leeds. They're 3 in front of Forest. They're 8 ahead of West Ham. They haven't won, though, in any of their last 5 games in the Premier League when they've played Burnley, West Ham, Bournemouth, Sunderland and Brentford. And the next 7 fixtures that they've got look pretty tricky. City at home at the weekend, United away, Newcastle at home, Arsenal at home, Fulham away, Palace at home, Liverpool away, straight after the international break, plus the Champions League fixtures thrown into that. Are they too good to get dragged into a relegation battle?
I think they are. And I think a bigger problem for them as well, Sam, is, like Crookie said there, some of these players are turning up in the Champions League. But are you looking at Simmons and saying, look at the standard of players you're playing against in the Champions League? As well. Yeah, Moani hasn't scored in the Premier League yet. But they're 10 points off Manchester United in 4th position. If I'm the hierarchy at Spurs, I'm saying we want to get back-to-back Champions League seasons. Not going to happen this season because they're miles off.
Can you see them getting back into contention for a European place?
No.
With games against City, United, Newcastle, Arsenal, Fulham and Palace and Liverpool over the next...
They could easily not win a game out of all those games. They could easily... Yeah, we've got some fantastic guests, experts for you tonight on Trans Europe Express. None less than the next voice you're going to hear, because when you're talking about French football, almost synonymous, I think it's fair to say these days, on television, radio, no doubt every other platform known to man and woman, is Julien Laurent. Hello, Julien.
Hello, boys. How are you?
Really, really great to hear from my friends. So many great stories happening in France just now. Let's start with the week that Roberto De Zerbi has had at Marseille. A very bad week on the pitch, but also a kind of week in which he's been reported that he's threatened to resign, then he has resigned, then he's not resigning. What's going on with... I mean, it's very hard to answer this question, I know, Julien, but what is going on with Roberto and Marseille?
I mean, a crazy week, really a nightmare week for them. First of all, obviously, Wednesday night and the way they were knocked out of the Champions League. One, by losing so badly at Bruges, and with a performance that was unacceptable from a team of this caliber and the manager of this caliber too. But then also, they thought until their game was finished that they would still go through just about until Benfica and Trubin scored that incredible goal.
Amazing.
And they were watching in the dressing room on a phone to realize that they were out of the Champions League, and that was heartbreaking in itself. Saturday was, I guess, not as bad, but they were 2-0 up and cruising away in Paris against Paris FC before crumbling again and conceding 2 goals in 5 minutes to drop 2 points for a disappointing draw. And really, that's at the image of not just this week, because as we said, it's a nightmare week, but also to a certain extent to their season, because they are so capable at times to put on great performances. And on the other hand, they look like an average team sometimes. And that's, for me, on De Zerbi as well, because he struggled to get that consistency. They've played 31 games. He had 31 different lineups to start the games. And as you said, on Thursday afternoon, there was a big meeting between him, Pablo Longoria, the president, Mehdi Benatia, the sporting director at the club, where basically he said, listen, if I'm the problem, I can resign. I'm happy to resign. We thought he'd resign. I think many people at the club thought he had resigned. Then he said he was not resigning. He said, I can go to war for another 4 or 5 years. Okay. But now, obviously, that put a lot of pressure on him and on the team. And next weekend, they go to Paris to play PSG.
Julian,
yeah, please. Sorry, please.
I quote what De Zerbi said in his press conference in Italian yesterday. He said, "I'm ready to go to war with this team because I come from the S word." And then obviously, has he? First of all, I would like to know, has it been translated literally in French? And how have the media and the rest of the French football world reacted to that? Because I know in Italy these sort of things will probably be divisive. There will be still people who will side with De Zerbi because of his history, because of his style, and because of the way he communicates. But is it the same in France?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, and to answer your question, it was translated as it is. Okay. But the French word starts with an M.
Yeah.
But the thing with De Zerbi is that he's been at war now, or certainly clashing regularly with the French media in his press conferences in general. So there's some with whom he's got more beef than others, obviously. But there's that feeling is tense a lot of the time when he does his press conferences. And as we all know, certainly when they were in Europe, you've got press conference almost every 3 days, before the match, after the match. If you play 3 times a week, they come 6 times in front of the media, and that's everyone, not just him, obviously. But I think that tension has not helped his case either, because in the same press conference that you mentioned, where he said about where he comes from, he also said, I'm not telling you everything. I don't want to tell you everything. Like many times he said, like, basically, we don't understand the game. We don't ask enough tactical questions. There's a lot of difficulties for him, but you know him well. He kind of likes the environment, I think. He likes adversity. Mm-hmm. I think he thrives in it. And also, Marseille is so similar to him as a football city. It's a city that lives football, breathes football, eats football. Like him, they're so passionate over there. He's so passionate about the game too. And that's why it was almost like a marriage made in heaven. But at times, when there's too much passion, it can obviously involve too much emotion as well.
Look, Julian, hang on a second while I ask, since we have Daniele Fisichella with us, I'm going to ask him the same question he asked you, but in reverse. I mean, it's all right me thinking that he's a great laugh and a really good coach. What about in his native Italy, Daniele? How does he go down there? Because they like largely they like a very professional, scientific approach to coaching, and maybe a little bit of Antonio Conte thrown in on top of that. The question is, when he's finished at Marseille, will one of the big Italian clubs be looking to take Roberto De Zerbi into the fold?
If they do, it will be seen as a gamble, because Roberto De Zerbi in Italy is extremely divisive, and probably is one of the most divisive coaches at the moment, because there are those who basically tell him he never won anything and you shouldn't have such an aura about yourself. And this is probably the people who think that the result is more important than the style. But then there's a big part of the media and the football fans that love him for what Julian has just said, his passion, his commitment, and the fact that his teams are a joy to watch. I think it could be linked to another great coach who coached in Italy a few years ago, Zdenek Zeman. He never won anything, but he made football enjoyer for everyone. But for this reason, he's extremely divisive. So that's why perhaps no big clubs in Italy have approached him with that conviction.
We should just say that in an important game, we'll come on to it with Julian. PSG have now taken the lead against Strasbourg. They're down to 10 men. We'll get more details about that for you in a second. I must move on then, Julian, because we have spent a lot of time over the last few years on this programme shaking our heads about Lyon. Because Andy Brassell is so devoted to them, talk about them rather too much. But but they're suddenly in a vein of form unlike any other. Am I right to think they've now won 10 games on the spin?
That's right, yeah, in all competitions.
Amazing. Wow. And they beat Lille this weekend, and so they're roaring along now. What's happened there? Is it just just Fonseca sorted them out?
Yeah, I think he's a big part. I think he's an outstanding coach. Really, really outstanding. The job he's done this season. Okay, they've just signed Endrick on loan from Real Madrid, and that's for a team, certainly for a Ligue 1 team, that's an incredible boost to have such a talented. I mean, the guy is so good. He's far too good, I think, for the league already. But even if he didn't score today, the job that Fonseca has done, even before Endrick arrived, and they signed another young Swedish international that scored today the winning goal, who looks already very promising, box-to-box midfielder, Nyate. But the job that he's done with not much money, not much recruitment either. Last summer, they had to sell some of their best players, and we're quite lucky, I think, to get hold of Malik Fofana simply because he got injured, and it was hard to obviously sell a player, even of his quality, injured and out until he's going to come back probably next month now. So he's done an amazing job, both in the league and in Europe, where they finished obviously top of the league phase in the Europa League, playing mostly the kids. And as we saw on Thursday night, they had one 17-year-old scoring and two 18-year-olds scoring. And you're thinking like, wow, this is even the academy is producing right now in this current cycle. But Fonseca, for me, is the main ingredient on why this Lyon team has been working so well this season. And if you add now, obviously, the recruitment of the two players that I mentioned, plus the players who, at times like Malik Fofana missed some of the action so far this season, I think they can have a really, really good second half of the season.
Julian, Paris Saint-Germain closing in on a victory as we speak, 2-1 against Strasbourg. How's the match been? A bit laboured for what I've seen, but are Paris Saint-Germain confident they're going to kick on in the second half of the season as they did last year?
Yeah, that's the idea, really. I think as we saw against Newcastle in the Champions League on Wednesday night, in the second half especially, they still, I think, lack a bit of energy and sharpness in those, like between the 45th and the 90th minute at times. Tonight, they lost Hakimi, who was sent off for a reckless challenge in the 75th minute. So they played 50 minutes with 10 men, but that's when they scored their second goal. And Strasbourg are a good team. Gary O'Neill is doing a really good job there. They would be a bit unlucky to lose tonight because I think the draw probably would have been a fairer result. But they have so much energy. They have so many good young players all around the pitch. They've got fluidity, a lot of rotation, a lot of movement, and it's really hard to play against them. I wouldn't be surprised if they were going far in the Conference League, by the way, as well. And credit to Gary O'Neill because under Liam Rossignol, the last few weeks of Rossignol, things were a bit stale. Gary O'Neill has brought a lot of energy back to this team, but it would be a big win for PSG because they could go back 2 points clear now of Lens before that big classic that I mentioned against Marseille on Sunday.
Julien, it says, as always, an education to listen to you. Thank you very much indeed. They're our great friend Julien Laurent with all the latest from the French League. I should tell you that Monaco won this weekend as well. Their first victory since November, and probably just getting back into some kind of shape before they have to play Paris Saint-Germain in the qualifying games for the Champions League. And if Julien Laurent was not enough, we're also staying with the big beasts of European football reporting. Next up, Germany with Raphael Honigstein.
Did you hear Ray's version this morning? Ed, have we got Ray's version of Singing Passenger? Take this in.
Arsenal have gone through an entire league campaign without losing. Played 38, won 26, lost exactly none.
Well, you only need the goals when they're running low. Only miss the net when the pressure grows. There's only one star boy by KO.
Saka off the bench to score. They are loving life at the Emirates.
Only know you've been high when you're feeling low. Please, Pep, leave us alone. Come on, Arteta, you've got to bring it home.
Jump on that boat because this is the way that we're going to live the next 4 months.
Please don't let it go.
Wonderful.
Isn't that really beautiful?
I need to jump on the boat as well.
Yeah. Tickets for the unlikely pilgrimage of Harold Fry available on www.haroldfrymusical.com. You'll absolutely love this. Passengers album One for the Road will be available on all streaming platforms alongside the official video release for the album's second single, Walk Upon the Water, featuring Kingdom Choir on YouTube, and www.haroldfrymusical.com. Like we say, you've got a stunning voice.
Yeah, let's talk about Germany now, and who better to join us to talk about that? Of course, he is a long-time fellow traveller of Trans-Europe Express, making a welcome return, the unmistakable voice and knowledge of Raphael Honigstein. Hello, Rafa.
Hello, guten Abend.
Guten Abend, the German jury. Thank you for joining us. We should start, inevitably, with Bayern Munich, who... They've not won for 2 games, but we're not really in danger of getting a title race in Germany, are we?
We might well be. They dropped another 2 points at Hamburg. A fantastic game on Saturday night. 2 traditional heavyweights, if not current heavyweights, going head to head.
Sure.
And Dortmund won today, albeit with a bit of good fortune against Heidenheim, and it's only 6 points. And Bayern are going to Dortmund in a couple of weeks' time. So let's see.
I'm very used to that sentence, and Bayern and Dortmund meet very soon, and then often, Rafa, at the back of that result, we're saying, it's all off again. Talk to me as well about Werder Bremen, because they no win in 10, inevitably. That means that the coach has gone.
Yeah, Horst Steffen got fired. He was only in the job for a few months since moving from Elversberg in the second division, where he'd done some fantastic work. And I must say I have a bit of sympathy for him, because he worked with a squad that was lacking a centre forward. You remember Leverkusen's Victor Boniface.
Sure.
He was their big idea to be up front, and he never, ever got going. Some injury problems, and when he did play, it didn't really work out. And Werder lacked that cutting edge up front. They have some nice players. They play some good football at times, but without that centre forward, they're really struggling. And even though they had a fairly decent game, I would say, certainly in the second half against Gladbach and a 1-1 draw, they pulled the plug on him.
Raf, going back to the game of Bayern against Hamburg, there is a player that really caught my attention. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Luka Vuksovic, the defender from Hamburg, 18 years old, really, really impressive. He scored, but not just because he scored, but the way he controlled the Bayern attackers. Is he the next big thing coming out of the Bundesliga?
He is definitely somebody who a lot of clubs are looking at. He had a fantastic game. He scored the goal, as you said. He looked really comfortable. He looked so confident the way he plays. But of course, he's a Tottenham player. So Daniel, you'll be delighted to hear, have him. And the question is, will anyone be able to get him out of Hamburg, out of Spurs effectively? Because a lot of
Raphael, with the current spate of injuries at centre back, Spurs may be using the next 24 hours to get him back to England.
I don't think they have the opportunity to do that.
No, not as I understand it. But yes, the German clubs may very well be eyeing him jealously. But one of the problems there is he has a contract for the next 3 or 4 years with a Premier League club, so it's all a bit tricky. Let me just tell you that in Spain, Bilbao have got a late equaliser. I'll get a goal scorer for you soon. 87th minute equaliser, making that one now in the Basque Country. Atletico Bilbao on Real Sociedad 1. And Luka Vuskovic is a source of endless conversation on the View from Lane podcast that I do about Spurs. Raphael, let's talk. I want to talk because inevitably we run out of time, but I must talk about Hoffenheim. Because when we think about German football, they're not the first name that passes your lips, but there they are, firmly ensconced in the Champions League places. How have they done that?
They're doing really well. They have a new coach who came in last season, saved them from relegation effectively, and in this season, he's doing really well. Christian Ilse, he was in Sturm Graz in Austria before, and they also took his former sporting director from Sturm Graz. So there's a really sort of a dynamic duo now in charge. And even though Christian Ilse has done some interesting team talks where he used a cauldron like Asterix style and threw lots of things in it, including it's probably best described as a sex toy to represent male prowess. It somehow did work, or has been working, and they're playing some amazing football.
That may be the first time in almost a decade of Trans-Europe Express that both Asterix and a male sex toy have been mentioned at all, never mind in the same sentence. Well done, Raphael Honigstein.
Thank you.
And I want to get on to Upamecano in a minute, but first we mentioned Dortmund, who've just gone above with their victory, takes them back above Hoffenheim into second place. I watched them play against Spurs in the Champions League, and they were ordinary, to really exaggerate what they did in North London. But they can't be that bad because they are second in the Bundesliga. And every time I see them play, they look like they're going to score plenty of goals. They look like they're going to concede every time the ball crosses the halfway line.
Yeah, they've been very shaky defensively, but they have found ways of winning most games since the restart. You were right. I mean, they were absolutely shockingly awful in Tottenham. I was at the game, and I was talking to the Dortmund officials afterwards, and they were so distraught because, of course, you can lose a game like this, but not playing like that. So they were absolutely gobsmacked just how poor their team had played before, because they had some decent performances in the Champions League.
Yeah.
And now they feel emboldened to the point that Nico Schlotterbeck, the German national defender, has said, we want to win the championship. So they really think that the 6 points that we mentioned earlier could be reduced and Bayern could be vulnerable. I am not so sure, I must admit, but it's a good sign that they have a bit of confidence, and of course the league can do with a title race. So a good weekend in that respect.
Looking at the defense of many German clubs, we know the Bundesliga is a high-scoring league, but what I found interesting is 12 out of 18 teams at the moment have got a negative goal difference from Freiburg below, basically. That's probably because Bayern dishes out heavy defeats to everyone. But if that is something could affect the German teams going into Europe, anyone but Bayern in a way.
Yeah, you're right. I think there's a lack of balance. Most of these teams, I mean, Leverkusen look more solid now that they changed managers. Of course, we know that it didn't work out for Erik ten Hag early in the season, and they're beginning to show signs of real improvement. Not quite the level that they played with Xabi Alonso, but I think they can be a decent team. And they're, of course, in the playoffs along with Dortmund. But Dortmund, strangely, for Niko Kovac, who has a reputation for being pragmatic and defensively solid, they have started to leak a lot of goals. They score goals as well, as we saw again tonight. But as a balance, overall balance, I don't think they have what it takes to make deep inroads into the competition. And Bayern once again stand as the one team, I think, who can challenge. They're going through a little bit of a rough spell by their standards, but they've shown some really good stuff, especially against PSG, where they won that game with 10 men back in November, to suggest that they will be competitive this year in Europe.
Yeah, there were two goals. There were 2-1 down against Heidenheim of all teams today, and came back to win 3-2 because they can score. A player I want to talk about is Deo Upamecano, a fixture at Bayern Munich for the last 5 years. Raphael, these days first choice for Didier Deschamps and a French team that might win the World Cup in a few months' time. And yet Bayern haven't yet managed to pin him down to a new contract. Is that because they don't mind if he goes? Or they just can't get him to sign it because there'd be a queue of English clubs looking for him if he was to become a free agent?
Yeah, they would love him to stay. The problem that they've had, and in a way it's a good problem, is that his performances have improved so much over the course of the last 12 months under Vincent Kompany, who of course knows a thing or two about defending.
Yeah.
That he, I think, suddenly has a lot more options than he would have had before. And as somebody who's out of a contract, he can basically decide where he wants to go, plus a huge sign-on fee. So the problem that Bayern have had is that the demands have been such that they have found really, really hard to meet. And they've been haggling about sign-on fees, about wages, about a release clause that perhaps should be in there or shouldn't be there, depending on your viewpoint. And that's why now we're in a situation where we've seen this before with countless other players, including Michael Ballack and so on, where Bayern feel that they can no longer wait and be sort of a passenger in this process. And they've kind of now set a deadline and said, this is the offer. It's not going to improve. Either you sign this or you can go. And that deadline is approaching very, very fast. And I think we'll have some clarity fairly soon. But it is indicative of first and foremost, his improvement as a player that has led to the saga in the first place.
Yeah, and hence, of course, the slightly green eyes being cast in the direction of Vuskovic at Hamburg. They may need reinforcements in the centre of their defence before very long. Listen, Rafa, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you.
It was equal. Raphael Honigstein there with all the latest from Germany. Let me tell you that game in the Basque Country has come to an end. A 1-1 draw in the end between Athletic Bilbao and Real Sociedad. Doesn't do any of them any good. Athletic remain absolutely stuck in mid-table, and Real Sociedad, who were hoping to close in on the European places, have dropped those 2 late points, which don't really, as I say, aid them in that endeavour. Atletico Bilbao 1, Real Sociedad 1. We'll go round the grounds in just a few minutes' time to get all the other scores from the big games that are happening in Europe. Thanks for being with us for that first hour of Trans-Europe Express, which has whizzed by. I hope the second hour will be equally entertaining and go by just as quickly. Thanks for listening one more time.
This is Robbie Williams with Angels.
I sit and wait. Does an angel contemplate my fate? Or do they know the places where we go when we're growing old? 'Cause I've been told that salvation lets their wings unfold. So when I'm lying in my bed, thoughts running through my head, and I feel that love is dead. In your cars, on the buses, I'm loving angels instead. Everybody. And
The Six Nations, where giants do battle and legends are made. Epic sports which demands an epic voiceover every time. And actually has an interesting story as well. It all started back in 1871 when Scotland beat England in the very first international rugby match. The other home nations were a bit jealous, wanted in on the action, and after England played Wales in 1882, they all decided to hold an annual festival of international rugby, or the Home International Championship, which kicked off a year after. Now, the first decade was dominated by England and Scotland until Wales finally won in 1893 and Ireland a year later. After years of dipping in and out of the championship, France was invited to join full-time in 1910. But because France isn't a home nation, they had to give it a rebrand and settle on the Five Nations. But France were actually kicked out of the tournament in 1931. They were accused of paying players when rugby was still strictly an amateur sport. They had to wait years to be let back in, but after World War II, the Five Nations resumed. Didn't always run smoothly though, like in 1973 when all 5 teams won 2 matches and lost 2 matches. Now, because they didn't do points difference at the time, they just decided that everyone was the champion. It's like trying to keep kids happy, you know, the whole "you're all winners." In the years following, other teams in Europe started to get better at rugby and actually got to a stage where they were regularly beating teams in the Five Nations. In 1997, Italy beat Scotland, France and Ireland home and away. So 2 years later, the Five Nations invited Italy in, creating the Six Nations as we know it. In recent years, there have been calls to expand the tournament further to other European teams. Georgia and Portugal have been prime candidates to join of late. It's also been suggested there could be 2 tiers with promotion and relegation to promote growth of the sport in Europe. But the existing nations are a bit reluctant. So for now, it looks like the Six Nations, or Six Nations, or Sei Nazioni, is here to stay.
Yeah, welcome back everybody. Second hour of 3, as you know, of tonight's edition of Trans Europe Express. Warning, next week, because of the Super Bowl, we'll be on for an hour less, so 9 to 11. We'll have to compact all of that information into 33% less. I'll just talk much faster than I already even do. I'm Danny Kelly, and with me tonight, I'm delighted to say, Daniele Fisichella is my co-host. And Daniele, before we get on to, Mbappe watch, which I'll come on to in a minute, why don't you give us all the 3 big games in Spain, Italy and France have ended now. Why don't you give us the full-time scores?
So let's start with Spain. There was the derby of the Basque country between Real Sociedad and Atletico Bilbao. Atletico Bilbao were at home at the San Mamés, 1-1 between Atletico Bilbao and Real Sociedad, with Bilbao equalizing in the 88th minute. Moving on to Italy, Juventus were dominant tonight at Parma, winning 4-1 in the end, so solidifying their fourth place. 2 goals from Gleison Bremer, the defender, 1 from Winston McKennie and Jonathan David as well, adding the fourth for Spalletti side. And finally, in France, PSG finding a late winner to beat Strasbourg away 2-1 and regaining the top of La Liga, of Ligue 1, still in play. There is still one game in play in Portugal. Benfica being held to a 0-0 draw away at Tondela with 30 minutes to go.
Thank you very, very much indeed. Very soon we'll be looking at everything that's been happening in Spain, then taking advantage of Daniele's presence to talk about Italy and a specific Italian player before we get to 11 o'clock. But right now here on Trans Europe Express, it's time for this.
Carrière le Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappé! Mbappé! Little give and go, Mbappe's in! Oh, it's 2-2! He scored twice in 2 minutes! Tête de Kylian Mbappé! Allez, Kylian!
Yeah, Kylian Mbappe back at the centre of the action this weekend. Daniele scoring. I was going to say he scored a late penalty to ensure a victory for Real Madrid against Rayo Vallecano, but that doesn't express my feelings about this. When I see games involving, and forgive me, I'm not suggesting any corruption here, I'm suggesting facts that I like to look at. Any of these games involving Real Madrid and Barcelona where they're not winning, where you suddenly see 8, 9, 10 minutes of added time, I know that they'll be attacking. I know that they'll be going forward, and so it's more likely that they'll get a free kick or an extra corner or something. But my heart sinks when I see yet another penalty win for Real Madrid or Barcelona in the last minutes of games. In this case, poor old Vallecano, subjection to a 98th minute penalty.
Yes, and Rayo Vallecano in the derby at the Bernabeu were reduced down to 9 men after the penalty, but they were already playing with 10 men when the 100 minutes struck, and Nobel Mendy foul on Brahim Diaz gave the chance to put Real 1 point behind Barcelona, and that was Mbappe contribution, the 37th goal of his campaign. However, for 60 odd minutes, you will be forgiven for thinking Mbappe was not actually on the pitch, but actually was, because he had no shots, no assists, no chances created for over an hour, probably the worst game of his season up to that point. Then he turned up, scored the decisive goal, and Madrid won. Was another ugly win for Real Madrid, accompanied by the whistle and the boos of the Santiago Bernabeu against the players, against the new manager, Alvaro Arbeloa. If the feeling is that the patience is running really, really thin after the defeat in Lisbona on Wednesday, which put Real Madrid out of the top 8 in the Champions League.
All right, Daniel, let me ask you a straightforward question. By the way, he did not Panenka the penalty and then run over to Diaz again like he did last week. No. A straightforward question. All right, we know that Real Madrid's an incredibly unusual club, and the players there all believe that they are global brands and therefore quite difficult to manage. What do the people who run the club think they're doing? I mean, all right, they can get rid of Xavi if they don't think it's going to work out. I get that. But if he can't handle a group of superstar players, what chance does Arbeloa have, having never even managed at this level before? I think it's a crazy appointment. I could be wrong.
The results of Real Madrid, at least in La Liga, say the opposite, because Real Madrid have been winning the last 5 games in a row, and the deficit to Barcelona is only 1 point. However, this is only the surface. Below that, there is the way the environment has been behaving is obviously in turmoil, the way the fans are perceiving the environment. And the fact that Arbeloa does seem slightly out of his depth in this role, and maybe we're being a little bit kind with him. I mean, today, at the end of the game in the press conference, he said, "I'm not Gandalf," which probably meant I'm not the nicest person in the world. I'm just looking for players that have the right attitude. I'm asking them to play with the right attitude, and I'm satisfied with that. But clearly, it is a manager that finds himself in the spotlight, perhaps where he was not used to, and with a team that, frankly, is not playing well. And we've been asking ourselves before the show, when is the last time that they actually played well? They are winning, they are getting the results, but is that sustainable, or will it only take a slightly more organized teams just to knock them out of a competition or to knock them out of the title race? The fact is that with Real Madrid, and this is going on for a few years, they know how to win, okay? And of course, I mean, they win the Champions League, the European Cup 15 times. They know how to win. But when they lose it badly. It falls apart. The game that they play at the Benfica, it was a car crash of a game where they actually took the lead and should have handled it better. They conceded the first goal from Pavlidis on the break after taking a corner. But they do know how to win. They rarely leave you a good impression. So whereas Barcelona seems only to know how to play well, Real Madrid seems only to know to win, but when they don't do it, they crash. I mean, it's past the watershed, but we can say Barcelona is love. Real Madrid is just sex. It's very straightforward sometimes. Tonight, it was the chaos. This afternoon, it was the chaos, and they reeled in that chaos at the expenses of the poor Rayo Vallecano.
Well, thank you for that insight into the home life of the Fisichellas. Thank you very much indeed.
I mean, it's just a comparison.
I'm only kidding you, man. I know exactly what you mean. And the Gandalf incident, what he meant by that, he's not a magician. Because Gandalf, of course, is a wizard. Gandalf is a wizard. Now, World Cup starting to be measured in weeks away rather than seasons away. Jude Bellingham, who has got a funny relationship with the club as a whole at the moment, but he limped off what appears to be a hamstring and he was in tears. Have we any update yet about the severity of his setback?
Yes, Arbeloa also said that Bellingham is going to be out for at least 3-4 weeks. Therefore, it's very likely he's going to miss the key playoff against Benfica. So we're looking at the quite lengthy ascent for the Englishman, perhaps puts him in doubt also for the next round of international fixtures. So again, one less chance for him to convince Thomas Tuchel that he has to be on the plane for the World Cup. Is a bad injury in a bad moment of the season when there are so many decisive games. So we're looking at least 3-4 weeks, which could impact his season and Real Madrid season too.
Yeah, I remember you what you don't, if you're an England fan, you don't like seeing the better players starting to clutch the backs of their legs, even though it's right. It might be right as rain in a month's time, but hamstrings are funny old things, aren't they? They don't always heal as well as you want them to do. You mentioned the fact that after that, well, we should talk about that astonishing game in the Champions League where Real Madrid didn't play very well against Benfica. Benfica didn't realise that they needed to get a 2-goal advantage and score 4 times to go through. But in the end, as so often in modern football, it all becomes about Jose Mourinho. But listen, if you were, Daniele, to write a story for a film script where Trubin comes up from the goal, having just realised they need another goal because they were winning 3-2, and scores... And it was one of those things where I was watching it live, and because it was late, the game had gone on for a long time, and I was clutching my head. This can't be real, and there it was. It was real. It happened.
And this is that was the best spot, if they needed one, for the new format Champions League that delivered drama until the last minute of the last game. That's exactly what UEFA wanted, and it's so interesting that it was Jose Mourinho to deliver that. In 24 seasons, Mourinho never been knocked out in the group phase of a European competition.
That's incredible.
So he was true to his standards. And let's go back to Mourinho. He started the Champions League with an handicap because the first game of Benfica was managed by Bruno Lage. He took over. They lost against Karabakh. So he only managed 7 Champions League games. And after 4 games, Benfica had 0 points in the Champions League, and they managed to save the season and qualify. It looked like a disaster, and actually no, they managed to beat Napoli and to beat Real Madrid. And now the funny thing is that having that playoff again against Real Madrid, he will go to the Bernabeu with his chest puffed up, Mourinho, because he knows that Real Madrid, one of his former clubs, are in a bit of a rough moment, to be kind, and Florentino Perez, the Real Madrid boss, the Real Madrid owner, he's never been fond of managers, but one, Jose Mourinho. He will probably have him back. So I think he's gonna get applauded. He's gonna get a good reception overall when he's in Spain. And I tell you what, on a knockout game, yes, Madrid on paper bet aside. I don't think you can discard them. I mean, I don't think you can discard Benfica at all. Mourinho has managed to revive them. So, yeah, I think, we'll say 60-40 for Real Madrid. But I think that gives Mourinho good chances.
The gods of football have been very kind to us with that draw. I'm not sure it's a very kind draw for Benfica, but you're right. If they can stay in the tie after the first leg in Spain, even Real Madrid's players are human beings. If they have to run out at the Stadio de Luz with the game still in the balance, the memories of what happened 3 or 4 weeks ago will inevitably flood back. We're all human beings. It's a beautiful, beautiful possibility, and it should be. Madrid can beat them handily at home, but if it doesn't happen, that second leg is going to be something else, and the Benfica fans will have something to say about it as well, particularly as they are not likely to challenge Sporting, who are in such amazing form, for the title in Portugal this season. That's it for Mbappe Watch. We'll be going next to everything that's been happening in Spain, including discussing why Marcus Rashford's spell at Barcelona is not being necessarily reported and seen as the absolute triumph that it's turning out to be, as he now, remember he's on loan, moves into double figures with goals since he moved there. He doesn't even start every game. We'll talk about that and much else besides in a few seconds' time here on Trans Europe Express.
It will be an underwhelming Premier League title.
It won't be.
I think it will be.
For Arsenal. If they win the title for the first time in 22
they won't care.
years, they will not
No,
care.
they won't care.
That it's underwhelming.
But
They'll just
everyone
think it's
else
job
will.
done. Well, yeah, last year he was giving Liverpool stick for the way they went about.
And I've been
winning
proved
it.
right when you look at them this year. It wasn't
they still won the league.
It wasn't a great Premier League
But they
last
still
year.
won the league.
Liverpool can't. That Liverpool team. That's what I said at the time. It was in March. We're at the Cheltenham Festival. I got a lot of stick from Liverpool fans, but I stand by it. You can't talk about the Liverpool team that won the league last year in the same breath as Manchester City's treble winners, United's treble winners, Jose's Chelsea, Arsenal's invincible.
But it was the first season in their development. It's like this season for Arsenal. This is the first season that they're going to put some silverware on the board. So you don't just automatically put them into a bracket with some of the greatest teams that have ever graced the Premier League. That happens over a longer period of time. It may well be that after that, they had to rejig. They surprised themselves by winning the title last year. They had to rejig. They had to rebuild for the future. It may be that they come again.
Well, it's a different story with Arsenal. They've been building up to this
Absolutely.
moment. And I think that's why Gabby says, not to their fans, but maybe to the rest of us, if they are only going to score 69 goals, you said maybe it is a little bit underwhelming. And I love Theo Walcott, but I can't believe he even asked the question on television. Would this Arsenal team beat the United team of 2008? Absolutely no chance.
It is a little odd, though, having come close 2 seasons ago with an attacking approach, a creative approach.
Okay, some breaking news for you. Liverpool fans might want to extend their listening. Fabrizio Romano, who's pretty much reliable on these things. I mean, I'm still struggling to understand the figures here. They're so remarkable. He's picked up on, I can't see where the original story came from, but he's picked up on someone else. He says here, Jeremy Jacquet to Liverpool. Here we go. Deal agreed now for June 2026, so coming in the summer. They understand that the fee for the Rennes centre-back, who is highly rated, of course, is 60 million euros plus 10 million add-ons. That's to Rennes, of course. And he will join the Liverpool squad in the summer. I'm still struggling for the words here. Unproven, really, at a high level, Daniele, but Liverpool prepared to gamble up to 70 million euros.
Huge fee for an under 21, yes, which is very, very young. But apparently, Liverpool beat Chelsea in the race to sign him, and obviously somebody that they can value a lot, and they see someone for the future. And again, signing a very young centre back after last summer, Liverpool signed Giovanni Leoni, who was extremely unlucky, the young Italian, to get injured and to break his knee in the first game he played for the Reds, who are basically a centre-back down. But interesting enough, they signed somebody for June and not for this window. So they continue to rely on Virgil van Dijk, on Ibrahima Konate, on Gomez as well. So they don't see the need to freshen up a little bit the defense. But of course, in June, maybe that could pave the way for one of the 3 aforementioned centre-backs to move somewhere else.
Yeah, well, Konate's contract's up, I think, anyway, isn't it? So they've got a lot of things that they need to sort out there. Okay, let's turn then to Spanish football. We talked already about Real Madrid and Kylian Mbappe, but Barcelona played well by beating Elche by 3-1. As I said in the build-up to this section, Daniele, Marcus Rashford got his 10th goal of his loan period. And I sometimes wonder whether it's, I don't quite understand why he's not getting absolute praises, flowers, as the dark kids say these days, for what he's doing at Barcelona. He doesn't even always start. So to get double figures, albeit in a very good attacking team, he's rebuilding his career, isn't he, after stagnating at Manchester United?
Totally. It's a success story. 10 goals, equally spread between continental competition, the Champions League, and the league. Scored last night the goal of the 3-1. And he seems always ready, fresh, and with a very good motivation when he comes into the pitch. And as you said, Danny, it's not easy to compete with the likes of Yamal, Lewandowski, Fermin Torres, Rafinha, and in an environment which is obviously extremely competitive. Barcelona needs to win every single game. Moving abroad for Rashford, playing in a country where he hasn't grown up, I think is a big move. But if we compare it to what Scott McTominay has done last season in Italy, he's done amazingly, scored 12 goals, from midfield. Rashford has scored 10 in all competitions. I think really the term of comparison should be there or thereabout. But I would expect with this number, if he keeps going, Thomas Tuchel is going to give him a chance. He's going to get him for those friendlies into the squad for those friendlies in March. And I think Rashford looks a great option for the English squad.
Yeah, and Michael Carrick doesn't seem to need him at the moment, the way he's got Manchester United moving. But this is great for Manchester United as well. Either they'll get a revivified player back, or he'll have doubled his market value during his spell in Spain, you know?
But, you know, for Barcelona, with Lewandowski potentially leaving at the end of the season, I think it would be important for them to try to lock Rashford into a new contract.
Yeah, I guess the issue there, as always with Barcelona, is the finances, isn't it?
Yeah.
He earns a massive amount of money at Manchester United, and every goal he scores, Manchester United will put another 10 million euros on his fee. But we shall see. I mean, Barcelona seem to have a way of making these things work, even if they have to sell parts of the city in order to make them operate. I want to talk about Atletico Madrid. You know, Diego Simeone is, to my mind, one of the great managers of world football. How he has kept that team competitive against those two financial, cultural and footballing behemoths that confront him every season is amazing. The fact that they didn't, 10 years ago, win one of those two Champions League finals is painful, without, of course, Gareth Bale preventing them from doing it. They drew this weekend with Levante, another result that sees them, quite happily in the Champions League places yet again, but not going to challenge for the title. And for the first time, I think there were genuine rumours. Now, maybe it was only just one person on Twitter, but it certainly caused a storm of discussion suggesting that this might be the great man's last season at Atletico Madrid.
And fans have started booing him at the Wanda Metropolitano.
That is nuts.
I know, but football fans are emotional and not rational.
Sure.
And after 15 years in charge for Simeone, came the time that he got booed by his own fans when they lost against Bodo Glimt, but also before they were losing because of some of the substitutions he made. He took off Pablo Barrios to make a defensive substitution, so some fans booed. In the end, Atletico lost in a very strange way. It is a game that after they took the lead, you would never expect them to lose, but they did. And now they are in a sort of a no man's land, 10 points off Barcelona, but with a 10 points advantage over Betis, who are fifth. So really, they are competing pretty much for nothing in La Liga. They know they're probably going to get the Champions League, but is that enough to justify another season for Simeone at the helm? They have been unlucky with injuries this season, I think, but also they made the signings that didn't quite pay off. The two Italians they signed, Ruggeri and Raspadori, haven't worked out. Raspadori has already been shipped away back to Atalanta. Pablo Barrios last night suffered a very bad injury. He's going to be out for a while. So Sorloth as well. So they've been unlucky, but only 3 wins in the last 11 games for Atletico Madrid. And now they got a difficult period ahead of them. They're going to play 9 games in 28 days in February, starting with a double header with Betis. First on Thursday away in the Copa del Rey, it's a straight knockout. Then they host them in La Liga. Then they go to Vallecano away. Vallecano are desperate because they're playing for salvation. And then Club Brugge away. So the next 4 or 5 games really can either release the pressure on Simeone if Atletico comes out well, or put him up even more, and it could be really be difficult for them. But I think Atletico in the last few years have lost a bit of that Atletico style. They seemed very easy to break down, I would say, very easy to score against as well, and perhaps they haven't compensated with enough quality and enough creativity up front.
When we start talking about transfers in about an hour's time here on Trans Europe Express, we'll also discuss the one that has gone through, where they've used the Conor Gallagher money to buy Ademola Lookman. But even that looks like an odd transfer, given the way they've played over the past 15 years under Simeone. We'll just watch that. And it's an interesting one. As I said, Daniele, the game tonight we were watching in the Basque Derby, it ended Bilbao 1, Real Sociedad 1, a result that did neither team any good. No. Bilbao are absolutely adrift in mid-table now, and the importance of that to me I think is that if they want to get Iraola in the closed season, a Premier League club will offer more money to Iraola. I'm assuming he'll finish up at Bournemouth, where he's done such great work. And a Premier League club might offer him European football, which at the moment doesn't look like it's going to be happening for Bilbao.
No, not at all. They're only 4 points above the relegation zone occupied by Mallorca, the last place. And it is a strange season because last season they managed to get to the Europa League semi-final, and then remember this summer everything started so well with Nico Williams announcing he extended his contract until 2030, refusing to go to Barcelona. Then they won the first 3 league games, 9 points out of 9. So we thought, okay, Atletico Bilbao are really going to push him for another Champions League qualification. Well, the season started unraveling. They have already conceded 31 goals this season. Last season, they conceded 29 in the entire league. They don't score many, only 21. Again, the injuries have not helped because Nico Williams, Laporte, Vivian, Iñaki Williams, they've all been out or are out with injuries. But then you think, what's their level? Because they've held PSG to a 0-0. They won in Bergamo against Atalanta and then capitulated against Sporting Lisbon at home, and maybe a draw would have qualified to the top 24. So extremely inconsistent, with a big risk of not making it into the top 6 this season.
Yeah, they can't get both the Williams brothers on the pitch at the same time. And because of their recruitment, which I admire, only by getting in Basque players, the lad who's playing up front at the moment is just not up to it. And I think it's putting a lot of pressure on the rest of the team. They need to find a striker from somewhere and somehow. Thank you very much indeed for that. For the next half an hour, as we head between now and 11 o'clock, we're going to pick Daniele's brains about Italian football. First, we'll go through all the latest stories and results. Inevitably, Antonio Conte is front and centre. And then at about 11:15, we'll talk about Lorenzo Insigne with the return of our much-loved cult hero section. Lorenzo is coming back to Italian football. It's an amazing story. We'll talk about the great Insigne as well very, very soon here on Trans-Europe Express.
The only problem I have with him, he done it again on the weekend against Arsenal. He played a pass to Mbeumo, and he was at fault for a poor pass. And he's thrown his arms up at Mbeumo, and Mbeumo's actually giving him some back of like, come on, as a player, you don't players throwing your arm.
Why is that wrong? That happens all the time.
I was going to say. But as a player, having played it at the game, anybody throws your arms up at you, you always have, you don't like it. Ask any players playing now, you don't like it. That's what he let himself down at. Garnacho copied him.
Don't compare Garnacho to Bruno Fernandes.
I'm saying he copied him, I'm not comparing him. I'm saying he copied. It's not a good example when you're throwing your arms up at your teammates. What he does on the pitch, his performances,
but isn't
outstanding.
That because he's from a different culture, from a different sort of upbringing, and
it's
he's
a
got
Portuguese mentality,
demeanour. He has, if you look at Jose Mourinho and the way he conducts himself, it's different to the way that Michael Carrick conducts himself because they're brought up in different cultures. And if you're going to have the World League, which
who else do you see do it?
Loads of players do it. Go watch Spanish football.
No, in the Premier League.
Yeah, but that's the point. I spend a lot of time in Portugal, as you know, and they are that sort of mentality. They are an expressive population. So I think that's why it stands out.
Quite a lot.
to South Africa with the Barmy Army on talkSPORT.
Yeah, England cricket is back in South Africa next winter and the Barmy Army is heading out in full force. This is your chance to be right there with them, with a week for two at the 2027 New Year's Test in Cape Town. Watch every day of the match at one of the world's greatest cricket grounds. Flights, hotel and spending money are all covered. You'll secure 2 places with the official Barmy Army, putting you right at the heart of the atmosphere with the loudest, proudest fans in cricket. So listen carefully. Here's how to enter. For your chance to win, text that word, WIN, W-I-N, to 83338. Your text will cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or you can phone. The number is 0343 418 7260. The lines close this Friday at 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. It's 18 plus and it's UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's are at talksport.com. So for your chance to win, text WIN to 83338. Do it now and good luck to you. So, Daniele, time to talk about Italy. And once again, but it doesn't matter how far Inter Milan get ahead in the league table, the focus is so often on Napoli and on Antonio Conte. Look, he's once again out of the Champions League, and I really want to talk about his record in Europe because I saw it firsthand when he was Spurs manager. He just doesn't seem to get to grip with it. They bounced back with a 2-1 win against Fiorentina after that debacle in midweek, if you like. But they're 9 points behind the leaders now, and also had an important injury. Captain Di Lorenzo, a bad-looking knee injury. And afterwards, Conte went on what can only be described as Conte manoeuvres. He had another one of his outbursts.
Yes, let's start with that. After the game that saw Napoli winning against Fiorentina, but Giovanni Di Lorenzo picking up a bad injury that will keep him away from the pitch at least for 8-9 weeks, if not more. So missing also the World Cup playoff for Italy. Conte complained, as he used to do in previous weeks, about fixture scheduling, calendars, and overall the way the football war is governed. So basically saying that it's a shame that there are far too many games that are played, and it's not right to for example, to have Napoli playing on a Wednesday night and then on a Saturday afternoon. He went on a tirade, which I can understand and I can sympathize with, only for every single club at the moment being involved with it. So obviously Napoli are no different, but they've been complaining a lot this week. I think what Conte is trying to suggest is that, of course, the players are stretched, they play too much, but we all know that, of course, and with the introduction of the new Champions League, he hasn't helped. However, I think he also feels that some of the bad results that his team has gone through due also to the high number of injuries that have incurred to Napoli. Napoli have been extremely unlucky. In the game against Chelsea, they were missing 7 or 8 starters, not only David Neres, but other players as well, very important. So I think some of the results were probably due to the fact that the players, and the players of the quality that Conte wants, were not available because of fatigue. But on the other hand, has to be said that the team has been strengthened this season. In the summer, Napoli have spent a lot, and they got some of the signings wrong, because 2 of the new signings in the summer, Lorenzo Lucca and Noah Lang, are already out of the door. One, Lorenzo Lucca, Forest, and Noah Lang at Fenerbahce in Turkey.
Yeah.
Sorry, Galatasaray.
Yeah, sorry, Gala. I want to talk to you about the state of Italian football at the back of this in just a second. But first, and I know we could do a whole programme about this, but why can a manager as brilliant as Antonio Conte has been and continues to be, won the title again in Italy, let's not forget, why can't he get to grips with these European tournaments?
It's hard to explain, but his record is so poor. And I can only put it down to the fact that he's a manager that likes to prepare one game at a time and put so much emphasis and so much detail and dedication into the game preparation that when it comes,
but he doesn't get 7 days for these European games.
I know, and when he doesn't get that, I think he struggles with players rotation I think he is struggling to get to grips with players' rotation. He trusts a group of players and a certain type of players that are 100% dedicated to the way he wants to train. Therefore, some others get frozen out a bit, and we talk about one maybe in a minute. But I think it's also the scheduling that and the preparation of the game, the tactical insight on the opponents, that maybe he doesn't feel he can get the same level when he's got a couple of games. But as I said, the record speaks for itself. He never went past the quarterfinals in the Champions League in his career ever. And he's been knocked out of this Champions League phase with the reigning Italian champions. Now, the reigning Italian champions have been knocked out of the league phase or the group phase of the Champions League only once before. That was in 2013, Juventus, managed by, you can complete the sentence.
Okay, I know exactly what you're going to say, yeah.
Antonio Conte, of course. I mean, it just speaks for itself. Napoli have lost their chances to qualify in the Champions League, not against Chelsea, who are a better team, but against the likes of Copenhagen, against the likes of Frankfurt, who they only did 0-0, a team that ships goals left, right, and center, against the likes of Benfica, who they lost, because of what we said before, because they couldn't balance League and Champions League in such a short period of time.
The Copenhagen result was a calamity, let's be honest.
Totally.
Now, I want to talk to you about, one of the players who scored against Chelsea and done well this weekend again, Antonio Vergara. And you could say, there we are. Italy have got a new rising star. But this lad is 23 years of age. And you, first of all, you said that Italy once again have not quite qualified for the World Cup. And they stand, I think they will, but it could be the third successive World Cup with no Italy, which to a person of my vintage is unthinkable. And yet part of the problem is there with a lad like Vergara. Young Italian players not getting a chance. I love the Italian league, but the young Italians are really struggling to come through.
And this is a player that exemplifies the problem. He's 23. Until last season, he's a Napoli academy product. He's been given out on loan. Up until last season, he was at Reggiana in Serie B, struggling. Now he played 7 games in Serie A this season. He scored at the weekend as well against Fiorentina. He scored his first goal in the Champions League. But why is Vergara playing? Because Napoli have got 11 injuries to attackers and attacking midfielders. Otherwise, he wouldn't have got a looking from Conte. He would have come on maybe for 10 minutes at the end of the game, and now he's starting game, and he's showing his quality. He's a good player with a low center of gravity, a good core strength. He's been likened to Omar Sivori. I mean, if you're not old, maybe let's put it a bit like Bernardo Silva, if you like, can really move in tight spaces. But the problem is that he should have been playing way before. If he was at Barcelona at 23 years old, he would have already played 100 games probably for Barcelona. Whereas if you look at Napoli, he looks like a French player. I'm sure he'll be given more opportunities. But then goes the argument that there are good Italian players, I like what people say, including, for example, Cesc Fabregas, who manages Como, and said that he had to sign a lot of Spanish players this summer, because he couldn't find any good young Italian players. But actually, there are. Milan have got a good left back in Bartesaghi, 18. He plays only because Pervis Estupinian has been a disaster at Milan. Otherwise, again, he would not have played. Marco Palestra, who's a right back who plays at Cagliari, he's been loaned out from Atalanta because he could not play there, and plays at Cagliari, and he's been one of the best right back in Serie A this season. Vergara, of course, the only exception is Pio Esposito, the 20 years old, who now starts regularly for Inter week in and week out, because Chivu has had him at the youth level at Inter, so knows him, trusts him, and Inter wanted really to build the next big thing at home without loaning him out again. But unless the Italian players are given the chance straight away, I'm afraid the future looks really dim, really dire.
And to me, it looks like it's not just to do with the bringing through the young Italians. There is a reliance in Italian football and experience. They love. I get it, because some of these players they can bring in more cheaply once they've done their work in the. Look at Henrik Mkhitaryan, no longer wanted in the in the Premier League, but still an excellent player. But he's playing on into his mid-30s. Good luck to him. But there's a lot of Italian clubs with a lot of very, very experienced players, and that must be slowing down the progression you're talking about, these young Italians.
Absolutely. And so is the likes of Luka Modric, who, by the way, this season has been excellent for Milan at 40 years of age. They do take advantage of the fact that the Italian league is played at a slower pace, of course.
Yes.
But I think in a way, I mean, I'm all for it to see Modric in Serie A. I've enjoyed a lot.
Beautiful thing,
But the other players that perhaps are not quite at this level, that have been brought in from other leagues abroad, well, why not playing the Italian players? Because Italy has demonstrated at a youth level, so at the level where Vergara was playing, under 17, under 19, under 21, that they are competitive. They easily get into the top 4 of tournaments, and then, okay, they win or lose based on episodes. But then they need to be given the opportunities to play in top teams. And the solution is not having the B teams playing in the third division like Juventus, Inter, or Atalanta have. No, they have to play in the top division and be playing regularly. Not just everything looks that basically it happens almost randomly, no? There are so many injuries and behind him. So, yeah, I think in a way it's great that Vergara is having the opportunities. In the other way, probably how many Vergaras there are in Serie B and Serie C, they don't get a looking. And then maybe it will be too late and we'll end up emigrate or play abroad and we'll never gonna get to enjoy them fully.
Okay, let me just say the rest of the top of the table there. Inter won 2-0 at Cremonese to maintain a 5-point gap that may be narrowed because AC play against Bologna on Tuesday. Incidentally, Jamie Vardy is being forced to play the whole game for Cremonese, which his age must be tricky. But there's another example. Great player and love Jamie Vardy, footballer. But what young Italian player is he keeping out of that team at Cremonese? Yeah. And Juventus, back in great form under Spalletti, who has taken no time at all to turn them around. They beat Parma tonight by 4-1, as you heard. Next here on Trans Europe Express, Daniele is going to talk to us about the surprising and wonderful, but also another old man coming back to Italian football, the return of a true Italian legend in many ways. Lorenzo Insigne has signed for Pescara. We'll talk about that next here on Trans Europe Express.
I've got to say, though, I mean, I am with Dino on this one, really, as opposed to yourself, Jay. But I think Thomas Frank should be given Tom. I think the trouble is, you see, it's too easy to sort of say, oh, we're not doing well, sack the manager, right? He's only been in the job 6 months. Let's be frank here, right? I'm going to spell it out for the other fans, right? They're listening to your glorious channel, right? We finished 17th in the league. He has not taken over a team that finished in the top 4. We qualified the Champions League because we won that trophy.
Yeah, we won the Europa League and we had a load of injuries and we sacked off the Premier League at the end of last season. So, yeah, I know we finished 17th and it wasn't good enough. I get that. But there needed to be a massive improvement. With the players that we've got, we shouldn't be where we are in the table. You can't... The performances, Chris, are not acceptable in the Premier League. That's your bread and butter. And look, we're a great side in the Champions League and we're a joy to watch. But that's got to go into the Premier League performances.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, look, we should have done better against Burnley. There's no question about that. But I do think as well, again, this is where we're Dino in this one, right? The thing is, I don't think it's all Thomas Frank's fault, right? We need, right?
Certainly on for Lautaro Martinez, who helps himself to his 13th league goal of the season. Nobody betters his tally so far in Serie A. Oh, Zielinski, what a hit! Oh, it's magnificent. Well, you don't hit them any better than that. Piotr Zielinski, top corner, top quality. Kivu's side 2-0 up in thrilling fashion.
Yeah, that was just some of the commentary there from this afternoon's match between Cremonese and Inter, with Inter winning 2-0 in Cremona. And you could have seen it live on the talkSPORT YouTube channel. We're going to be showing Italian football on Sunday afternoons. Just thought I should alert you to that. Free, of course, to you over on the talkSPORT YouTube channel. Now it's time, after a couple of years of being away, for another cult hero.
Incredible Zlatan Ibrahimovic!
Ronaldo! That's magnificent!
Dennis Bergkamp! Dennis Bergkamp! Dennis Bergkamp!
Yeah, this is by way of telling you really about a really quite unusual transfer that's happening as we speak. Lorenzo Insigne, 5'4" of goal-scoring power pack. A legend at Napoli, of course, a European champion with Italy. And people thought he was casually playing out his days in Canadian football with Toronto FC. But, Daniele, he has signed for Serie B team Pescara, to give them their full title, Delfino Pescara, who as recently as last year were in the third level of Italian football. Tell us about Lorenzo Insigne and why he's so beloved.
What a story. I mean, he signed not just for any club, he signed for Delfino Pescara, who are bottom of Serie B, by the way, so really at risk of going back to Serie C. And is the team where Lorenzo Insigne, who was born in Napoli, made his breakthrough in professional football in the season 2011-2012. Now, that Pescara side, who was in Serie B in 2011-2012, had this front three: Marco Verratti, Ciro Immobile, Lorenzo Insigne.
Mad.
Fair to say, they won the league, of course. They won the Serie B league by a storm. They took it by a storm. They were managed by Zdenek Zeman, who's the
great manager,
great manager, probably the most attacking manager. We were talking about the Zerbi before, so it was the Zerbi before the Zerbi, of course.
Yeah.
So they took Serie B by storm. Then the following year, all the three of them, Insigne went to Napoli, Immobile moved to Torino, and then Verratti moved to PSG straight away. And of course, Pescara went down, finished bottom of Serie A, and they got relegated. Now, Lorenzo Insigne, 34 years old, whose contract with Napoli was terminated 3 years ago, the season before Napoli won the first Scudetto with Spalletti, had been in Toronto, been in Canada, where he played 76 games. He had some injuries as well, scored a few goals. But, let's say he was willing to come back to Serie A. And he's been linked, Insigne, with Fiorentina, with Parma, with Lazio, with Serie A sides, a couple of them who definitely not going to get relegated this season. But he decided to go to Pescara, where he's got a contract until June with an option to renew. Of course, if Pescara manages to stay in Serie B, which at the moment seems unlikely. Yesterday was on the bench for the first time for his new team. He didn't come on. They drew 2-2 against Mantova. But perhaps next Friday, away at Cesena, which is a must-win game, with every game is a must-win for Pescara these days, he might come on. And this will be a great story for a player that is part of the Italian heritage, the modern heritage. Let's not forget, he won the Euros with Roberto Mancini in 2021. He was the number 10 of that squad, and the player who was providing the creativity up front, scoring a magnificent goal in those Euros in the quarterfinal against Belgium.
We should make the point as well. You mentioned that astonishing forward line that Pescara had with he, Verratti and Immobile. Well, Ciro Immobile is also on the move. He has joined Paris FC, which is another fantastic story, I think. And did you say that Insigne had tried to persuade him to come back to Pescara as well?
Yes. There were some talks of the two friends being reunited. With Immobile this season coming back from Besiktas to join Bologna at the beginning of the season, only to get injured in the very first game of the season against Roma. So being very, very unlucky, Ciro Immobile, who, by the way, at the moment is the Italian player still playing, will score more goals in Serie A, so he holds this record. So unfortunately, his experience in Serie A has been cut short, and Immobile goes to Paris FC for his third spell abroad in his career, because he also played for Borussia Dortmund. He played also for Sevilla, actually, his fourth spell abroad, and trying to have just one last go, really, at in a major league, of course. But unfortunately for Immobile, who came back to Serie A hoping perhaps to regain the confidence of the national manager, first Spalletti and now Gattuso, now seems that he's quite out of the frame. Going back to Insigne, to be fair, he's such a cult figure, he's such a cult hero in Italy, that a type of shot is named after him. Now,
wow.
You know, in Italy, in England, you got bandit like Beckham, no? When you think about Beckham, you think that kind of shot. Now, Insigne has done something similar so many times, which in Italy is called tiro a giro, which is in Napolitan way, tiro a giro, which means bandit shot. And this is exactly what he was trying to do, coming in from the left-hand side, curling on the right-hand side, which is exactly that goal he did against Belgium, and was mentioned before, Euro 2021, a typical tiro a giro. So bandit like Insigne, we could call it. If he saves Pescara, I think there is a sequel of a movie already prepared.
Now then, that's two of our favourite Italian strikers with an I at the start of their name. Lorenzo Insigne, who we just talked about there, Ciro Immobile, who's gone to Paris FC. And in the next hour of Trans-Europe Express, we'll be talking about the transfer of the third one, and perhaps even the most favourite son of Trans-Europe Express, because Mauro Icardi is probably coming back to Italy as well. And for fans of both Arsenal and Ajax, you might want to listen up as well to our transfer section. News coming through of a transfer between those two clubs as well. You're listening to Trans-Europe Express. We've still got an hour to go, and during that time we'll talk to Tim Vickery about South America. We'll look back on what's happened in the Europa League. We'll have transfers for you, not just tittle-tattle, but some actual information, including, as I say, an Arsenal to Ajax transfer and the latest on Mauro Icardi. Then we'll be going around the leagues as well. You're listening to Daniele Fisichella and me, Danny Kelly. Double Dan on Trans-Europe Express. We've got another hour to go.
I'm doing this gig up a ski slope end of season in Austria, and I'm with my dad, and we're travelling down to the gondola. It's a big gig, but we'll get up there in a gondola, and my security goes, Maradona's here and he wants to say hello to you. I'm like, Maradona in Austria? I'm like, yeah, get out of the car and there's Maradona. And like, you know, I don't speak Spanish. And, but we're very happy to see each other, and we have our pictures taken together, and we go up in the gondola, and my dad's like, what's your life like, son? I go, it's amazing, isn't it? People like Maradona want to come and see me, And then 2 days later, I'm looking at the news on the Mac, and Maradona is at the Chelsea game. And that Maradona hasn't got a beard at the Chelsea game. That wasn't Maradona that I met.
No, it was.
It was an imposter.
What, claiming to be Maradona?
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. You ever been scammed like that?
Not like that. Maradona coming.
Didn't you scammed someone though, didn't you?
What was that? What
It was
a lot of people, mate. Which one?
You scammed someone to get in a club, didn't you? Saying that we thought you was a monster.
Oh no, that was the guy that was the lead singer. Oh my God, you've thrown me now. His name. What was the band? Oh my God, Brother Beyond, and his name was. Can't remember it.
No.
But anyway, I got in there.
When Sir Jim Ratcliffe took control of footballing operations at United, the Manchester-born billionaire was somewhat welcomed in as a homegrown hero, ready to save the club from the dark days of the Glazers. But in just 12 months, he became a punch bag for many fans. So what happened? Let's take a look and you can decide for yourself. The important context here is that over the last 3 years, the club has lost over 300 million quid. And from day dot, Ratcliffe committed to fixing this, which of course is the right thing for the club. But what seemed to get fans' backs up is the way Sir Jim Ratcliffe, accompanied by Sir Dave Brailsford, went about it. For example, talkSPORT understands their lunch options at the Carrington canteen have been reduced to just soup and sandwiches, which the higher-ups at the club say will save them £1 million a year. Now that might make sense for many who don't get free meals at work themselves, but it gets a little bit more picky than that. It was reported that after staff brought some stationery, they were ordered to send sellotape back because it wasn't considered essential. The reward for being Steward of the Week used to be 50 quid, but that was scrapped and replaced by a paper certificate. And such is the grip Ratcliffe has on spending, he reportedly scrapped company credit cards, meaning some staff racking up hundreds of pounds worth of expenses and spending weeks out of pocket waiting to be reimbursed. But it's not just the stingy decisions around the amount of tea bags in the cafeteria. In 2024 alone, Ratcliffe oversaw 250 redundancies and more were announced at the beginning of 2025. Now, while there are people who acknowledge that United staff numbers are overinflated, it's the optics which aren't great. Because while all this has been going on, Casemiro's getting paid 350 grand a week, and the club forked out 14 million quid getting rid of Eric Ten Hag and Dan Ashworth. But United fans' rage doesn't just stop here at the cuts. Ratcliffe's unpopular decision to introduce a flat ticket price of 66 quid for every fan, even children, certainly did not go down well. For fans, it feels like the very foundation of the club's support is being attacked for the sake of making marginal financial gains. But Ratcliffe has backed it, saying if you shy away from difficult decisions, then nothing is going to change. And time will tell whether these measures will improve operations at the club and help drag standards up on the pitch. But one thing's for sure, his first year wasn't exactly a charm offensive, and there's still a long way to go for United to be back to where many say they belong.
Yeah, welcome back to Trans-Europe Express, the final hour, the third of tonight's 3-hour show. I'm Danny Kelly. With me this evening, I'm delighted to say, Daniele Fisichella. helping us through all the big stories that are breaking. Got a lot to get through in this final hour. We'll talk about the Europa League, particularly the progress made by Portuguese sides. Good enough at this stage to see Portugal being one of the countries handed an extra Champions League place next season. A very important thing for Jose Mourinho, who might be finishing third. We'll also have all the latest transfer news for you, including those transfers involving Arsenal and Liverpool. And we'll take you around the leagues towards the end. So welcome back one, welcome back all to Trans Europe Express, where regular listeners will know this time of night means only one thing. We get the piece of string, join up the two tin cans and make contact. London Calling with Tim Vickery in Brazil. Good evening, Tim. How are you?
I'm very well, gentlemen. How are you doing over there?
Really good. Daniele is waving at you like on the radio, so that's very good.
No, yeah, sorry, I thought we were on video.
Tim, I want to start with Lucas Paquetá. Tell us all about his transfer back to his homeland, but also the importance of it, because to me this looks like an enormous transfer. The idea 2 years ago that you would take a current Brazilian international who was playing for a Premier League team in London and had the money, the chutzpah and the nerve to transfer him back to Brazil would have been laughable. This is an important transfer.
3 words, gentlemen. Club World Cup. Game changer. Money. Flamengo earned money from the Club World Cup. They've also got their sights on it. They really want to win the next one. They're champions of Brazil. They're champions of South America, and it's not enough. They want the whole thing. So they are very, very ambitious. There are also the personal circumstances of Paquetá, both wanting to get away from the place where he was under investigation, and also a need to shine in front of his home public in the build-up to the World Cup, because there's every chance he could be in the team, not just a squad, but he does face competition, and his leading competitor, a fellow called Gerson, has just moved back to Brazil as well. There is always a big push for home-based players in Brazil's squad, especially now that Brazilian football has more money. So he's back. The back injury, I wish my back injury would clear up, as Paquetá's has done, but the back injury that kept him out of the last 3 games for West Ham mysteriously cleared up, and he was available for
I suspect your back injury is worse than his back injury. Put it like that, Tim.
I think it might be, yes. He was on the bench for essentially the Charity Shield, the Super Cup. Flamengo, the league winners, Corinthians, the cup winners, a one-off game in Brasilia. Now you're saying Charity Shield. I know it's not a proper title, but remember, Jose Mourinho taught the English that some coaches think the Charity Shield is a title, and everyone over here thinks it's the title as well. There's a cup at the end of it. You want to win it. So it was a very competitive game, and Paquetá was unleashed in the second half after something I don't think I've ever seen before on the football field. Corinthians were 1-up, goal from another homecomer who was in the Premier League, Gabriel Paulista, the centre-back. You might remember him from Arsenal days. He forced a goal home. And Flamengo at half-time, obviously you go in for the team talk, and the coach there, Felipe Luis, he develops the strategy. Now, there'd been an incident right at the end of the first half where had an elbow been thrown by a Flamengo player? Had it been an elbow? And the players left the field. They come out for the second half, and the dreaded VAR determines that, yes, an elbow has been thrown and the player is sent off. So that 15 minutes that Felipe Luis is just spending giving his team talk, based on the fact that we've got 11 players, forget that one, because VAR has sent him off. It's the most bizarre piece of VAR. I saw, to introduce a third Dan into the conversation, your old mate, Danny Broadcaster, the notorious Baker, having one of his frequent rants about VAR and its meddling kids tendency. I agree with much of what he says on this subject, but I wonder what on earth he would make of this. VAR changing the number of players to be played during the half-time interval. So Flamengo then are chasing the game. They're a goal down, they're a man down. Paquetá comes on. And there's some touches of quality, one or two moments when he might think, what on earth have I done here? Because he puts one glorious pass through, but the fella is on his feet and doesn't read it. There really isn't a game second half, because it's stop start in the way that Brazilian games so often are when one side is protecting a lead. Flamengo have one chance in stoppage time, and it falls to Paquetá, and he hooks over from inside the 6-yard box, and they concede a second with the last touch of the game. So 2-0 to Corinthians, an unhappy homecoming for Lucas Paquetá, but I'm sure there'll be happier days ahead for him.
Let me ask you about Kendry Paez, because you are the first to alert us to these super talented young South American players, and looking at what Endrick's doing at Lyon, I'm very glad to have had the heads up so far ahead of time. Kendry's on his way back to South America already, though.
Yeah, the Ecuadorian Phil Foden, almost ludicrously precocious, this fella, little left-footed attacking midfielder. I remember him scoring on debut in Ecuadorian football when he was 15. I remember him playing and scoring in World Cup qualification when he was 16. So far ahead of the curve. But all the superstar status that he was given in Ecuador, and I don't think it did him any good. And the last 18 months or so, even before he moved to Europe, with Chelsea have bought him, and they've had him at Strasbourg. So obviously the current Chelsea boss knows all about him, and may be party to this decision which has just been taken, because it hasn't gone particularly well. He hasn't lived up to expectations. And so 18, the age where most promising South Americans are coming over from South America to Europe, he's already heading back. He's going to River Plate in Argentina. That's a good club, I think, for him to go to. It's a club that love players of that type. There's no doubt about it whatsoever. It is a backward step. Hopefully, it'll be one step back for two steps forward in the future, because there is a lot of talent there. But you always wondered with him whether, not only physically but also emotionally, all of this was happening too much too young.
Perhaps, Tim, he is enthused by the idea of playing in the second largest world stadium, which is going to be the new stadium of course, River Plate, El Monumental. They presented this week a plan for an amazing stadium, which I'm sure they'll have no problem in filling it out. But tell us more, and also how they're going to pay for it.
Well, it's already their stadium. It's already the biggest capacity stadium in South America. Already. They want to make it even bigger. So they're going to put a roof on it, and they're going to extend it from about 86,000, extend it to about 101, something like that. So it's probably not as major as some of the building work they've already had on it that got rid of that horrible space with a running track around the outside. The bizarre thing is, despite all the money that they made, despite going out in the group phase, they made money from the Club World Cup. They couldn't even qualify for the Libertadores this year. They are in the Europa League equivalent, the Copa Sudamericana. So Kendry Paez, coming back to South American football, will not have the Libertadores. He had it with Independiente del Valle of Ecuador. He won't have it this year with River Plate, which is absolutely bizarre.
I think a story that probably has more traction at the moment, maybe in South America, Tim, you'll tell me, Corinthians women's team, playing against a very powerful Arsenal team, got very close to winning the world title this afternoon.
Yeah, this is the first of these Women's Champions Cups, the meeting of the victors from the champions of the various continents. The first time, and we're going to have this every year, with the exception of the years in which there is a full-blown Club World Cup for the women's game. So, first time, and obviously Arsenal have an advantage here because it's being played when the semi-finals were played at Brentford, but the final is played at Arsenal Stadium. So that's one advantage. Number two is that poor old Corinthians have to come over from high summer to a very bleak London winter when they're out of season. So with all this in mind, they did remarkably well. We're always interested in this because it's the first time, you don't really know what the hierarchies are between the different continents. Is there a massive gap? And Corinthians, they played their two games pretty much on the back foot. In the semi-final, they're up against Gotham. from the United States, champions of North America. They got through them 1-0, soaking up pressure and breaking out. And that was a model of play for most of the game against Arsenal as well, losing 3-2 after extra time. But that really is a defeat with honour. And it's good news for Brazilian women's football as it builds towards the next World Cup, which is being held in Brazil in the middle of next year. So the sport in Europe has made massive advances over the last 2 decades. Brazil rested on its laurels a little bit after a couple of Olympic silver medals and was overtaken, but some signs that Brazil certainly can compete with the best.
And Tim, finally, I'm going to probably lose any Brazilian friends I ever had. To me, Neymar turns 34. Happy birthday to him. To me, the fella's a busted flush, but that's not how he's viewed in Brazil, is it?
Well, he's got a chance to prove that he's not a busted flush, and he didn't do much last year with Santos. I know they were avoiding relegation.
A lot of the time as well, to be fair to him.
He was, yes. To be fair to him, we always knew that coming back he was going to pick up muscular injuries, but he picked up plenty, and he didn't play particularly well. And he put off a knee operation to ensure that they avoided relegation. He had a great last week of the season, but against real rubbish teams. It works massively in his favour that the Brazilian League has already started. We had the first round in midweek, the second round is coming up midweek. He hasn't played yet because of his knee operation. He turns 34 on Thursday. On Wednesday, he's expected back. Santos, who are on a losing streak, they're at home to Sao Paulo, coached by Hernan Crespo, with Lucas Moura. I'm sure you remember him, Danny.
Amsterdam
making his
and all
way, indeed, making his way back from his latest injury setback. The pressure is on Neymar to produce because he hasn't got very long to get back into that squad in time for the World Cup. It helps enormously that the Brazilian Championship is up and running. This is a first. Usually it doesn't get underway until late March, early April, so there's only really kind of Michael Rodent games at this time of the year. Now, at least Neymar has got something serious. I find it hard to judge him as a footballer based on what we saw last year because he never really got a run of games and we never really saw him anywhere near peak fitness. Ancelotti has ring-fenced this one quite carefully. He said, I'm not taking anyone to the World Cup who's not 100%. There's no passengers. There's no players who can just come on for the last 15 minutes. So he set the bar. And one of the big narratives now in Brazilian football over the next few months, starting from Wednesday, will be, can Neymar clear that bar? Watch this space. I'll be reporting on it for you every week on the Trans Europe Express.
Absolutely, Tim, where you've once again lit up our lives. Thank you very much for joining us from South America. Next up, Daniele will guide through everything that's been happening, both in results terms, but also the significance of these results in the Europa League.
They seem like a different team. You know, Fernandes is picking the ball up in air as he wants to, and it looks like he's controlling that midfield. You know, you've got Mainu who's come back into it. He's really, you know, amazing performances, really, when he hasn't played in the Premier League since probably May, isn't it? Something like that. So, you know, certain players have come back in, Ben, and, you know, it looks like they've been let off the leash. And some of the goals against Man United, against Arsenal, Cunha's goal was a fantastic winner, but even the second and first goal, Burmo took it so well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think United have had these players. They've had players that are verging on the edge of world class. They've had them for the last couple of seasons, but they just haven't been able to show it. They haven't been able to go out there and express themselves and play with a smile on the face. I know this system. We all know this system didn't really suit Man United with three at the back, and it wasn't rocket science to change it to four. It really wasn't. So I think everybody is just is on board with this kind of confidence, and now everybody.
To South Africa with the Barmy Army on talkSPORT.
Yeah, England cricket is back in South Africa next winter, and the Barmy Army is heading out in full force. This is your chance to be right there with them, with a week for two at the 2027 New Year's Test in beautiful Cape Town. Watch every day of the match at one of the world's greatest cricket grounds. Flights, hotel and spending money are all covered. You'll secure two places with the official Barmy Army, putting you right in the heart of the atmosphere with the loudest, proudest fans in cricket. So listen carefully. Here's two ways to enter. For your chance to win, text WIN, W-I-N, to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or you can phone. Call 034... do it right, Danny. Call 0343 418 7260. The lines close this Friday at 4 p.m. That's when you have to answer your phone if it rings. It's 18 plus and UK residents only. This is a network promotion and the full T's and C's are available at talksport.com. So for your chance to win, text WIN to 83338. Have a go now and good luck to you all. So, Daniele, let's talk then about the Europa League. I want to get on to particularly Roma because I think they're one of the big favourites for the title. But you were pointing out that the progress of the Portuguese sides, both in this and the other tournaments, means that at the moment they could very well be in line for that extra Champions League place, which would be great for the Portuguese league and possibly for Jose Mourinho. But Porto and Braga are the ones doing the heavy lifting here.
Absolutely, doing well, both in the top 8. So did Sporting Lisbon, to be fair, in the Champions League. And that means that now Portugal are 6th in the UEFA country ranking, overtaking the Netherlands. And they're very likely to qualify 3 teams to the next season Champions League, one via the qualifiers, of course. And that means that for Jose Mourinho, who's currently 3rd in Primeira Liga, Liga Portugal, with Benfica, with virtually no chances of winning the league after drawing 0-0 tonight against Tondela. Well, there is still a great hope, more than a hope, to make it to next season Champions League. And of course, for the entire Portuguese movement, it's a great news because, of course, the Champions League bring more revenues. So, the Portuguese teams are really taking the competition seriously, and especially the Europa League with Porto and Braga doing well. And they look poised to go quite far, I will say, in this competition.
Of course, the amazing progress of the English teams in the Champions League, as well as the teams like Villa in the Europa League, means that that other extra Champions League place, and we started the show talking about the power of the English teams, it looks very likely to be going to England, yes?
Yeah, it's almost nailed on. They got a 5 or 6 points advantage over the other nations. At the moment, the second nations in the ranking is Poland, because they've done extremely well, especially in the Conference League. But this is likely to reduce, to diminish as the knockout stages goes on. So obviously the race for the extra place is between Germany, Italy and Spain, and currently Germany are ahead. Every win carries some points, but then the points get divided for the number of teams that took part in the European competition. So the more teams you qualify for following rounds, the less the points get divided. So obviously England are in the driving seat, and it looks like fifth place was going to qualify for the Champions League. Remember, the first time the UEFA was giving the extra place, it was Italy who got it. Last season it was Spain, and I do feel it's going to be like a circle: Italy, Spain, Germany, and then one is always going to be destined for England, because it's a little bit of a conundrum. The more teams you qualify, the less each point you gain weighs, because of course they need to be divided. But England have got not that problem because they qualified all of them.
Well, Newcastle may make it 6 out of the whole lot.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm looking at the way that the Europa League table ended up, with Lyon and Aston Villa in fantastic form there at the top. And then you come down through Midtjylland, who did brilliantly, Betis, Porto, Braga, who you've already discussed, Freiburg, but lurking in 8th place there, I noticed Roma. And this is not just because I happen to have you here on it, but they strike me as a team who they are lurking. 8th place does not reflect their likely progress in this tournament, Daniele.
No, they lost a couple of games, especially the one at home against Lille, where they missed 3 penalties that they should not have lost. And I feel, the first season under Gasperini, they are still work in progress, and probably they pay the price at the beginning of the season there. But in the end, they managed it, they scraped it. And it was actually the game that provided the most drama, that 1-1 draw against Panathinaikos on match day 8, because Roma were playing with 10 men and equalized in the dying minutes with the Ziolkowski's header. I feel Roma, after Aston Villa, are probably the second biggest favorite to get all the way to the final. Of course, if they can avoid Aston Villa in the draw, because they could be placed on the same place of the draw, and then, of course, one of those two teams will knock each other out. Roma, as I said, are good on the eyes. They are improving. Some of the mechanism of Gasperini perhaps are not quite there. Sometimes the pressing is not quite as relentless as he used to be at Atalanta, the intensity. But again, it is a team that is quite young as well, so it is improving a lot. And he's done a lot of business recently in the transfer market, to signing Daniel Malen, Brian Zaragoza, Robinho Vaz, very young from Marsiglia, but promising as well. So I feel if Roma can avoid two things, really: the potential derby with Bologna playing in the playoff against Brann, but they could be paired with Roma in the next round. And then if they avoid Villa, then Roma, yes, of course, could be one of the teams to look out, because they got, again, European experience, European pedigree. They played the Conference League final and won it 4 years ago with Mourinho. The following season, they played the Europa League final and lost it against Seville. And there are still a lot of players who were involved in both finals.
2 more British qualifiers. Celtic, with Martin O'Neill getting the team together just in time to go through. They've got a tough game against Stuttgart. But I want to talk about Nottingham Forest as well, who I thought would finish in the top 8. They haven't quite managed that. And unfortunately for them, the reward is 2 games against Fenerbahce. And every time an English team gets drawn against a Turkish side, I think, that could be tricky, because you have to go to Turkey. But Turkish teams just don't go deep into these European tournaments.
No, they don't seem to do that as well. They are getting, obviously, more exposure into European competitions thanks to the introduction of the Conference League and the restructuring of both Europa League and Champions League. But you're right, for the amount of money they spend, for the level of players they are able to attract, you would expect at least the likes of Fenerbahce, Galatasaray, and in other competitions as well, Besiktas, to do better. And this maybe could be an opportunity. The return leg is a Forest anyway, so I think Forest have got a bit of an advantage. You would feel that Forest, again, it goes back to the discussion that we were doing before, the English domination, a team that this season is struggling in the Premier League domestically. You will feel is still level on par, or perhaps better than most of the teams that play against them in the Europa League. Going back to Celtic, again, probably had they not changed manager, had they not have been in turmoil, I think probably they couldn't even made into the top 8. But Stuttgart is a tough client, and maybe alongside the disappointments of this first phase of the Europa League, you could play Stuttgart, a team that is doing well in Bundesliga, maybe should have done a little bit better in the Europa League. But then when it comes to the big disappointments, I will say Nice, Feyenoord, the Rangers, who didn't make into the top 24 for all different reasons. Nice, we know the club is in a bad state. Feyenoord, young players, young manager in Robin van Persie, and Rangers, again, they started with an handicap. They are picking up now. But I think these are 3 big guns that are missing, and perhaps it's a shame.
Yeah, Rangers at least did pick up their first and only win of the tournament. And for people of a certain vintage like myself, who remember the golden age of football behind the Iron Curtain, there's a draw in this qualifying round. Ludogorets against Ferencváros might be the most East European football tie I've ever seen down on paper. And I'd be bewildered if Andy Purcell wasn't going to at least one leg of Ludogorets against Ferencváros. Bulgaria against Hungary, their people. Next up, we'll be turning to the transfers in what's been a very quiet winter transfer window across Europe, I think. But 1 or 2 big names on the move now. And they've only got, another 20 hours to make these things happen. Let's talk about some of them that have happened and might still happen next here on Trans Europe Express.
Looking at the points, they're on the same points as Crystal Palace. They're 2 in front of Leeds. They're 3 in front of Forest. They're 8 ahead of West Ham. They haven't won, though, in any of their last 5 games in the Premier League when they've played Burnley, West Ham, Bournemouth, Sunderland and Brentford. And the next 7 fixtures that they've got look pretty tricky. City at home at the weekend, United away, Newcastle at home, Arsenal at home, Fulham away, Palace at home, Liverpool away, straight after the international break, plus the Champions League fixtures thrown into that. Are they too good to get dragged into a relegation battle?
I think they are. And I think a bigger problem for them as well, Sam, is, like Crookie said there, some of these players are turning up in the Champions League. But are you looking at Simmons and saying, look at the standard of players you're playing against in the Champions League?
As well.
Yeah, Moani hasn't scored in the Premier League yet. But they're 10 points off Manchester United in 4th position. If I'm the hierarchy at Spurs, I'm saying we want to get back-to-back Champions League seasons. Not going to happen this season because they're
can
miles
you see
off
them
it.
getting back into contention for a European place with games against City, United, Newcastle, Arsenal, Fulham and Palace and Liverpool over the next
They could easily not win a game out of all those games.
Yeah, welcome back to Trans Europe Express, where, you know, the transfer window is nearly finished. It's been a relatively quite, I think when we look at the money that's changed hands compared to the last two winter transfer windows, particularly in the Premier League, it's going to be a very slow transfer window, but we are getting some big stories, none bigger than the one breaking tonight, I think, in some ways, Daniele. The news that Jeremy Jacquet, much wanted by Chelsea, the French Rennes centre-half, he's very, very young, but has having a medical tomorrow at Liverpool after the club's agreed a fee of €55 million with possible add-ons of another, these are pounds actually, £55 million with another £5 million in add-ons. And the reason is that they seem to have preferred the bid from Liverpool over Chelsea is the fact that he's going to stay there until the summer. But the truth is, I know Liverpool really with Van Dijk growing more mature and Konate coming to the end of his contract, they need centre-halves. This is a huge move by them.
Yes, it's a big move for a player that has been talked about quite a lot, and it's one of those moves where a big clubs try to move early to try perhaps not to fix an issue that is current, but one that will become much more persistent and much more important comes the summer. The feeling is, of course, that with what Liverpool got at the moment in the centre-backs and in the defence area, they are well equipped, but securing Jacquet at such a young age, but at such a hefty price, of course, is a big commitment for any team, let alone Liverpool, who has already spent money for a centre-backs, young centre-backs last summer, Giovanni Leoni, signing him for Parma for around 35 million, only for the young player to suffer an horrific injury in the first game he played and being out for the season. So now is Liverpool trying once again to go down the route of a promising young player. I mean, Jeremy Jacquet has had a good season so far at Rennes, but he's an under-21, obviously unproven in a league as good and as big and as intense as the Premier League. But of course, that's the way the world of football is going. Now, big clubs need to move swiftly for prospect talents, and the price, as we've seen, it's very, very big.
We're paying more for potential than we are for experience now, aren't we?
Absolutely.
It's very, very interesting. Mateta of Crystal Palace has been the centre of the entire transfer window. He's made it pretty plain that he wants to leave Crystal Palace. It was thought that Premier League clubs would be in for him, but the favourites now are AC Milan, who've had a £30 million offer accepted for the French centre-forward.
Yes, so Mateta is very keen on joining AC Milan, as he made it absolutely clear last night when he posted an emoji on his social media channels after he was left out of the Palace squad. So Milan are glad to get this offer accepted. However, the deal is not done yet because he has to undergo medicals, and we do understand that the beef further examinations, especially on his knees. You know, he had a few injuries recently. So they just want to be absolutely sure that Mateta is in good condition. He's not going to suffer any new injuries. And then once that's been clear, the French striker is going to move to Milan. It's a great move for Milan because they do need a physical centre forwards. By the way, they've already signed Fulkrug in this transfer window, so they're getting two strikers. And obviously, but they got somebody with Premier League experience, still in his peak, of course, somebody who can run the channels as well, better than perhaps Fulkrug is more of a static centre forwards. But if you look at the situation of Milan, who, by the way, don't play cup competitions at all this season, they have 6 strikers, 6 centre forwards: Fulkrug, Mateta probably, Leao, Jimenez. They also have got Pulisic and Kunku. For maybe a manager, Allegri, who only plays with one of them up front and 2 wingers, and only 1 game per week. Maybe it's a bit of a waste.
Well, maybe it's an odd-looking transfer given the personnel they already have in that position. I'm wondering whether this one looks odd. This one is done. Ademola Lookman, so brilliant for Atalanta 18 months ago, has gone to, of all clubs, not noted for buying wingers unless they turn them into fullbacks, have paid a decent fee to go to Atletico Madrid.
40 million for a player whose contract expires in the summer. So it's a big fee. And for a player who was linked with a move away last summer to Inter, only for Atalanta to refuse a similar amount of money, 35, 40 million. So apparently now they got themselves convinced. It is interesting because Ademola Lookman is Atalanta's best player at the moment and is the main source of creativity. However, Atalanta a few weeks ago got Giacomo Raspadori from Atletico Madrid. So obviously the two clubs are in a very good relationship. So they paid 25 million euros for Raspadori and they got 40 millions in return. So in the end, it comes out quite cheap for both the clubs. I think Ademola Lookman has been one of the best players in Serie A, but yes, you are right. I want to see him how he adapts in La Liga and under Simeone, and also in a team where there is plenty of creativity up there from the son of Simeone himself, Giuliano, of course, Julian Alvarez, still Griezmann knocking around. So of course, he's a hugely competitive environment for Lookman.
Another transfer I want to talk about is the news just breaking. Ajax, who of course are having a quite disastrous couple of seasons and the club appears to be in turmoil, have decided that the way forward is to rebuild Arsenal's team of 3 years ago. They've already brought in Tomiyasu. Bless him, he had a terrible injury, was out of contract and out of football. He's got a 6-month contract. But tonight we hear that the transfers have been agreed and is going through of Alex Zinchenko. Now, these are not... Tomiyasu is opportunistic, but the idea of Ajax bringing in 29-year-old players is so contrary to what they used to do historically, although we've had the Jordan Henderson and all the rest of it. But I suppose they've got to change their ways as well because it's not working for them in the Netherlands at the moment.
No, the season is not going really well. And of course, even their European season has been disappointing. So they're going to get a bit of experience, probably for a last push to get in as high as possible in the table. The league we know is gone. Perhaps a top 2 finish is still in reach. So at 29 years old, Alex Zinchenko, 1.5 million euros plus adds on. He only played 5 games for Forest this season on loan from Arsenal. So he definitely needs some game time. If he's fit, he'll probably get it at Ajax. He's a good environment. I mean, he's a 20 years old, but very, very experienced. He played hundreds of games in the Premier League. He played under Pep Guardiola. So I think he's one of those players that perhaps has faded out a little bit out of favour at top clubs in England. But I think in a club at Ajax, if he's given time and if he's fit, it's probably a good signing.
The Italian clubs, I know they are wonderful and historic and very successful European powerhouses, but they are open to being predated by the Premier League's money.
Absolutely.
I notice here that Liverpool, needing defensive reinforcements immediately, Jacquet not joining them until the summer, they are apparently going to make a last-minute bid for Inter Milan's Dutch wing-back Denzel Dumfries, who, of course, would be an ideal player for the Premier League. He's strong and mobile in the way that you have to be now for that league. But why would Inter let Denzel Dumfries go? He's a fantastic footballer.
Also, why would they let him go right now that he's injured and they've been waiting for him to come back since November and he's about to come back and Inter desperately need his best right wing back. Also, if Inter cannot sign a replacement and they've been thinking about signing Ivan Perisic, for example, I think it will be suicidal for Inter to let him go. Denzel Dumfries has made no secret that he might move away in the summer and he could do it for a fee around 25-30 million. He recently changed his agent, but I don't think Inter are in the position to sell one of the best players. Of course, Liverpool would like to have him, and I think Inter were trying to start a negotiation for Liverpool to release Curtis Jones, and that stalled after Arne Slot made it quite clear that he still wants the midfielder, which will be, for Inter, will be a major coup, Curtis Jones. But I don't think Liverpool are happy to let him go just yet. So probably this is something that is not going to happen. But look out, it could happen. It could well happen in the summer And I think Denzel Dumfries probably is one of the Inter players, maybe one or two, that might leave this summer.
Okay, finally, let's talk about Juventus. They apparently need another striker. There's some talk about them looking at Beto at Everton, who is not always in the team. But the one that's really exciting us is the links, and I don't know whether they're real or not. You'll know better than me. Trans-Europe Express #1 favourite, Mauro Icardi, being linked with Juventus in the last 2 days.
And I was so excited to tell you before we started the show, but unfortunately I need to tell you that after tonight's game, Spalletti said to the media, we don't want him. I don't want Icardi. We are good like this. If we don't find a player with certain characteristics, we are fine. And then he added about Icardi, who, by the way, Spalletti managed when he was at Inter. He's a fantastic goal scorer, but he brought family issues inside the dressing room. So again,
he brings drama, doesn't he? He brings drama.
A bit of a dig at Wanda Nara and Mauro Icardi. I think he will be a right fit for Juve, but it will be very curious. The Galatasaray, who play Juve in the playoff of the Champions League, sell their striker to Juventus. I think it will be really, really unusual. And I can't see it happening. But Juventus probably looking for Beto, yes, as you mentioned, perhaps looking even for Alexander Sorloth of Atletico Madrid, although yesterday he picked up an injury. He doesn't really speak like a vote of confidence to Loïc Openda and Jonathan David, who scored tonight again, given that probably Juventus' best striker, Dusan Vlahovic, is still out and injured. Then again, you probably have too many in forward areas and not enough reinforcement in midfield.
Yeah, it's got. I mean, look, I don't want to get into the kind of television programs going on about the transfer window, but it will be fun and it will be interesting tomorrow to see what these clubs do. Of course, the Premier League clubs always find money burning a hole in their pocket in the last. What they've been doing for the past 30 days, I don't know, but they always find something to do on the last day of the transfer window. Thank you for giving us the latest on all of those with the news that Ademola Lookman has joined Atletico Madrid. That's definitely done. Jeremy Jacquet will join Liverpool in the summer, and Alex Zinchenko has left Arsenal for Ajax. Next, as we head towards the finishing line here on Trans-Europe Express, Daniele will take you around the rest of the European leagues.
Did you hear Ray's version this morning? Ed, have we got Ray's version of Second Passenger? Take this in.
Arsenal have gone through an entire league campaign without losing. Played 38, won 26, lost exactly none.
Well, you only need the goals when they're running low. Only miss the net when the pressure grows. There's only one star boy by KO.
Saka off the bench to score. They are loving life at the Emirates.
Only know you've been high when you're feeling low. Please, Pep, leave us alone. Come on, Arteta, you've got to bring it home.
Jump on that boat because this is the way that we're going to live the next 4 months.
Please don't let it go.
Won the
Isn't that really beautiful?
I need to jump on the boat as well.
Yeah. Tickets for the unlikely pilgrimage of Harold Fry available on www.haroldfrymusical.com. You'll absolutely love this. Passenger's album One for the Road will be available on all streaming platforms alongside the official video release for the album's second single, Walk Upon the Water, featuring Kingdom Choir on YouTube, and www.haroldfrymusical.com. Like we say, you've got a stunning voice, and Ray's might just be that little bit better. Don't be...
No, look, it is.
Don't be threatened.
Let's not beat around the bush.
But Arsenal fans in for a treat this morning.
I've done that at 10 to 6.
Yeah, heading to the finishing line here on Trans Europe Express. Now you've been listening to me, Danny Kelly, and him, Daniele Fisichella. We should go around the leagues and see what's happening in other European countries. Where do you want to start, Daniele? Andy Brassel often starts with Portugal.
I think it's good to honor Andy Brassel and... Oh, I'm substituting tonight. Let's start with Portugal, of course. Portugal, Liga Portugal, Sporting Lisbon, leaving it late again today to beat Nacional at home. Luis Suarez with a 96-minute strike to give them a 2-1 win. A repeat of last week win at Aruca, also 2-1 with a late strike. A victory is very important for Rui Borges' team because they cut the deficit at 2 points against Porto. And Porto plays tomorrow at home, away at Casa Pia. So now they could go again +5 on Sporting. There is still the return game, Porto Sporting, which, by the way, is played next week on the 8th of February, which could be the title decider, really. Actually, it's played on the 9th, on Monday, the 9th of February. Porto Sporting could really decide the title. Let's not forget, Porto are still unbeaten in Liga Portugal, and they've only conceded 4 goals this season. Another team that is unbeaten in Liga Portugal is Benfica, who, by the way, tonight drew 0-0 away at Tondela, who are penultimate, therefore in the relegation zone. And it was a very costly 0-0, a very frustrating 0-0 for Benfica after the heroics of Wednesday night against Real Madrid. Benfica had 22 shots, 10 on goal, 70% ball possession, ended the game with an XG, if you believe in those things, 2.23. It was another fantastic performance from the Tondela goalkeeper, Bernardo Fontes. Mourinho was left frustrated, but in the end said, we keep doing the job, the work. I mean, he kept a positive attitude this time. He didn't really complain. But again, if tomorrow Porto wins away at Casa Pia, and I have no reason to believe they shouldn't win, they will go +12 on Benfica. Braga also plays tomorrow. If they win away at AVS, who are bottom of the league, they can go 4th ahead of Gil Vicente.
Meanwhile, in the Netherlands, Daniele, an absolutely crushing defeat for Feyenoord by PSV, as PSV are running away with the title. There's no other word for it.
But I mean, they got a lead of 17 points after beating Feyenoord today 3-0, and then it goes back to the argument we were talking about with the Champions League. They are already out of the Champions League, PSV, so they got only the domestic competition to play for, and it seems a bit of a waste of a season. I know it's not a given to succeed in Europe and to do well, but when you have such a big lead, when you are so dominant in your domestic league, then to crash out of the Champions League in that manner, it is disappointing, because it's a team, yes, they're gonna win the league, okay, but what else? What else for them? The season European has been cut short. Ajax, on the other hand, only 2-2 against Excelsior yesterday, and so week after winning in midweek at Villarreal, by the way. At least they picked it up a little bit. But again, the Dutch league looks done and dusted. There's a battle for third and fourth spot between NEC Nijmegen and Ajax. But yeah, PSV pretty much rubber stamping another title.
Yeah, NEC doing very, very well indeed. And you should make a point, Troy Parrott got another fantastic goal for AZ Alkmaar, all of which will be leading to his transfer to one of the bigger clubs in Holland, one of the medium clubs in Germany, or back to the Premier League very, very soon. Certainly not in this transfer window, because AZ will want to keep him, but probably in the summer. Listen, during the football season here in the Republic of Ireland, which of course is a summer season, I was regularly giving updates. And so if I might be so bold, I'd like to tell you about what's going on in the northern part of Ireland. The Northern Irish Premiership is now it's past its halfway point. And there was a big result this weekend where Crusaders, normally such an important team, but struggling this year, got beaten 4-2 at home by Larne. And it looks like Larne, they've now got, I think, an 8-point lead with a game in hand, are strolling to the title in Northern Ireland. This is an amazing story, really, Daniele, because they're a long and established club who've been around and about. Then they've had a terrible, terrible time, and they only got themselves back into the upper tier of Irish football in the year 2019. I mean, that is... it was a big thing for them to get up. They have a small ground. It's called Inver Park, and it only holds 3,000 people. The only trophies they've ever won in the past are ones that don't exist anymore. So let's say they've had no major trophies. But this will be their third title win in 4 years. Now, if you consider the relative power of Linfield, Glentoran and Crusaders in Northern Irish football, the idea of a team coming out of the eastern part, of the east coast there of the country, and winning the title 3 years out of 4, which it looks like Larne are going to do now, was incredible. So, yes, people will say they've had a bit of backing and all the rest of it, but you still have to put that to good use. And as I say, they now look, unless they absolutely implode, like they will be winning their third title in 4 years. And it's pretty incredible. They've got an artificial pitch, which I think helps them a little bit, but even so, it's a story that needed telling, and I'll keep an eye on this as they head towards the finishing line over the next couple of months, which takes us, Daniel, to a question that I've been dying to ask you for the past 3 hours. We're now into counting down the weeks to the World Cup playoffs. How are you feeling about Italy's prospects? Because I'm going to say it, on behalf of world football fans, in a World Cup with nearly 50 teams, the idea of not having regular winners and one of the great football countries of the world, Italy, at the World Cup for a third successive tournament and in a country with a huge Italian descended population is unthinkable.
For the reason you just said, and for the fact that Italy has missed the last 2 World Cups, by default, I should feel a little bit optimistic because I think in the end, fortune should turn. And the opponents that Italy has got on his path, Northern Ireland first, coincidentally, in the semi-final playoff, and then one between Bosnia and Wales, are teams that Italy should, on paper, beat. However, the mood around the Italian national team is the opposite, is pessimistic after the qualifiers that we had, and there is always that dark cloud hanging over our heads of the fact that we don't have great talents and we cannot produce great talents. I think if Italy goes back to the basics, which they know how to do it, how to defend, how to be solid, how to be resolute, and give a little bit more of courage by playing young players as well and attacking players, and for example, starting to getting all the Premier League contingent into the squad, the likes of Coyote, the likes of Udogi, the likes of Savona, the likes of Gnonto, everyone who plays in the Premier League to be given a chance no matter of their age. I think Italy has got a great chance, and yes, I think Gattuso has got a great responsibility there to make the right calls up in the next few weeks. And don't be scared. Don't look at the CV of the players. Look at what they've done so far.
Just the names of those players you mentioned in the Premier League. There's loads of talent. They just have to get them out there. Pick them on merit as well. Pick them on merit.
Start them. Start Pio Esposito. Start Palestra. Start Vergara if he deserves. Yes.
Listen, thank you very much. I just wanted to hear the tone of your voice there. Thank you very much, Daniele, for all your work over the last 3 hours. You've been superb. In our poll, half of you think that Napoli are the big flop of the Champions League so far. Coming up next here on on talkSPORT, it's how to win the World Cup. I'll be back.